Chapter 470. Master Tam Yuan stared at Chu Xiu. There was no pressure, only calmness. He had met many people overseas and experienced many things, but he could not see through Chu Xiu. It should be said that the human heart was the most difficult thing to see through. Although the jade slip and the comments had proven that Chu Xiu was the one who met the requirements the most, Master Tam Yuan's intuition told him that something was wrong. Chu Xiu did not directly answer Master Tam Yuan. He only said in a deep voice, "Good and evil are only separated by a single thought. Even if I promise you now, I reckon you won't believe me. The path of martial arts is difficult. I can only promise that I will do what I should do in the future." Master Tam Yuan nodded. Chu Xiu's words made him feel at ease. If Chu Xiu patted his chest and said that he would definitely do good and save people in the future, Master Tam Yuan would not believe him. He had stayed in the East Sea for a long time and had seen many things like human nature being evil. If Chu Xiu pretended to be too hypocritical, it would be very easy for Master Tam Yuan to see through him. Looking at Chu Xiu, Master Tam Yuan said in a deep voice, "I just hope that I didn't make the wrong choice with my cultivation. Chu, don't disappoint this old monk. Now that I have begun the cultivation transfer, I have decided to disperse all my cultivation. A part of it will return to the world. I can't collect this part of the power, so I can only let it drift away. However, I still have a part of extremely pure power that I can inject into your body, Chu, to help you take a step forward. Therefore you have to be ready later. Empty your mind and prepare to receive my power. Don't worry, this is an extremely pure power. It doesn't contain any impurities and the amount won't be too great. At the very least, with the strength of your physical body, you can completely control it." After a pause, Master Tam Yuan continued, "I've learned a lot of things in my life. I was born in a small temple, and the cultivation techniques I've learned aren't very powerful. I reckon you won't be interested in them. Later on, I obtained quite a number of cultivation techniques in the East Sea. There are strong and weak ones among them. Therefore, I only plan to teach you 2 martial arts. One of them is an ancient cultivation technique that I accidentally found in the East Sea. There are even traces of Tantric Buddhism in it. However, I saw that its power is not weak, so I cultivated it. This cultivation technique is called the sun-shifting technique. The great sun-changing art was derived from the meaning of stealing the heavens and changing the sun. It could seize the fortune of heaven and earth and fuse it into one's body, unleashing one's potential to the extreme. However, its might was powerful and it was easy to injure others and oneself. The sun of the sun-shifting technique also has the meaning of Vairocana. Changing the sun is to exchange one's state of mind with Vairocana. Therefore, whether your body can withstand the power of Vairocana will depend on you. As for the second technique that I'm going to impart to you, it's the formless sealing palm imprint that I created by gathering countless Buddhist techniques. Form is emptiness and emptiness is form. When the formless sealing palm is cultivated to the extreme, the 5 skandhas are all emptiness. Life and death gather in the palm, evolving into the myriad worlds of heaven and earth, changing constantly. When speaking of the formless sealing palm, even Master Tam Yuan couldn't help but reveal a hint of pride in his tone. Although the sun-shifting palm was also his main cultivation technique, it was written by predecessors. Even if he learned it, there was nothing to be proud of. On the other hand, the formless sealing palm was created by Master Tam Yuan himself. In Master Tam Yuan's opinion, it was the condensation of his lifelong martial Tao. Master Tam Yuan put his palms together, and his body emitted spots of Buddhist light. He said in a deep voice, "Chu, empty your mind. When I transmit these powers to you, the sun-shifting technique and the formless sealing palm will also enter your mind. It also contains some of my cultivation experience, allowing you to skip the cultivation stage after obtaining these 2 cultivation techniques and be able to use them instantly. However, it's something that you didn't cultivate on your own, so its peak is limited. The experience I give you doesn't belong to you, so it can only help you evolve 80% of the charm of the cultivation technique. If you want to walk your own Tao, you still have to rely on yourself." As the Buddhist light around Master Tam Yuan became more and more intense, the light also surged into Chu Xiu's body. This instantly added a lot of things to his mind, and he also felt like his body was about to explode. However, the power really entered Chu Xiu's body as Master Tam Yuan said, causing Chu Xiu to instantly feel as if he had entered another realm. The biggest difference between the unity of heaven and man and the 5 Qis unification was that the power that could be mobilized was different. No matter how strong the 5 Qis unification was, it could only mobilize one's own power. At the unity of heaven and man realm, one's own power had already faintly merged with heaven and earth. When one attacked, one could naturally borrow a trace of the power of heaven and earth. Even if it was just a trace, the power was shocking enough. Of course, whether the borrowed power was strong or not depended on how strong one's understanding of the power and how strong one's control over the power. Otherwise, no matter how much power one borrowed, one would not be able to control it and would only be a waste. At this moment, Chushio was already immersed in a very strange state. Half of his mental power seemed to be in his body, and the other half was in heaven and earth. As the two gradually merged, Chushio suddenly opened his eyes. It was as if he had stepped into another world. In such a short time, he had actually stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. In fact, Chushio already had a vague premonition of stepping into the unity of heaven and man realm. However, at that time, Chushio was still lacking an opportunity. Now, Master Tam Yuan had given him this opportunity. Finally, Chushio could successfully step into this realm, and the process of breaking through could be said to be without any obstacles. This could be attributed to Chushio's stable foundation and deep accumulation. It could also be said that Master Tam Yuan's power was too strong. He was so strong that he had given Chushio so many things without saying a word. However, it was not over yet. Chushio was far from happy. Master Tam Yuan's sun-changing technique and formless sealing palm had not been imparted yet. Compared to the previous power, these two techniques were more important. Therefore, Chushio still did not move. Instead, he directly opened up his mind, allowing the words and Master Tam Yuan's experience to be poured into Chushio's mind. In fact, Master Tam Yuan's actions were very similar to the Tantric sect's enlightenment technique. It could create an expert at an extremely fast speed. The sun-changing technique had a trace of the Tantric sect's aura, and it was not surprising that Master Tam Yuan used a technique similar to the Tantric sect's enlightenment technique. However, Master Tam Yuan imparted everything he knew without reservation, which was a huge damage to his mental power. Now that Master Tam Yuan was nearing the end of his lifespan and was on the verge of death, he felt at ease using this method to pass down his techniques. Meanwhile, over 10 miles away from Dragon Beach, Zhongxian had already started to return to the Great Light Temple. At that moment, a monk in white clothes in his 40s ran over hurriedly from afar. When he saw Zhongxian, his eyes lit up and he quickly ran over and said, "Martial nephew Zhongxian, have you seen Master Tam Yuan?" Zhongxian looked at the monk in white clothes, put his palms together and said, "Greetings, Martial Uncle Ming Qi. I've seen Master Tam Yuan, but he refused to come to our Great Light Temple." "Where's Master Tam Yuan now?" Ming Qi quickly asked. Zhongxian said, "Master Tam Yuan chose Chushio to be his successor. He's currently imparting his techniques in the inn outside Dragon Beach." Ming Qi slapped his thigh and shouted, "Oh no! I was still a step too late." Master Su Jing deduced that Master Tam Yuan wants to leave his techniques in the Central Plains. If our Great Light Temple can obtain Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, we can successfully obtain Master Tam Yuan's reputation. We can even use this reputation to go to the East Sea to preach. How can you let Master Tam Yuan impart his techniques to someone else while you're there? And it's even Chushio. The Great Light Temple had 3 major Zen halls and 6 major martial academies. Among them, the 3 major Zen halls had the least number of people, but they were the strongest. The Karma Meditation Hall did not focus on martial arts, but the Karma secret techniques of the Buddhist sect. Its master, Venerable Maitreya Su Jing, was comparable to the divination masters of Taoism in terms of divination and karma deduction. The Maitreya Buddha was the future Buddha, and Su Jing's nickname was Venerable Maitreya. One could imagine how strong his attainments in the karma path were. Moreover, even Abbot Su Ci had to consult Su Jing for most of the Great Light Temple's decisions and let him deduce them before making a decision. Although this could not ensure that the Great Light Temple would never make a mistake, it could reduce the error rate to the minimum. This time it was the same to welcome Master Tam Yuan. After deducing that Master Tam Yuan was preparing to leave behind his inheritance, Su Jing immediately had an idea. The Great Light Temple did not care about Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, but the Great Light Temple cared about Master Tam Yuan's reputation. Master Tam Yuan had already laid the foundation in the East Sea. At this time, if someone from the Great Light Temple went to the East Sea as Master Tam Yuan's successor, then the pressure of preaching would undoubtedly be very low. Therefore, Su Ci immediately sent Ming Qi over to remind Zhongxian of this matter. Ming Qi was not very anxious at first. After all, in his opinion, even if Master Tam Yuan wanted to leave behind his inheritance, he would definitely leave it to Zhongxian. Among the Buddhist martial arts practitioners present to welcome Master Tam Yuan, the old monks of the Subodhi monastery were about the same age as Master Tam Yuan. As for the other Buddhist martial arts practitioners, how could they compare to Zhongxian? In the end, who would have thought that in the end, not only did Master Tam Yuan not give his inheritance to Zhong Xian, but he gave it to Chu Xiu, who was not a Buddhist. Compared to the anxious Ming Qi, Zhong Xian was still calm. He just said lightly, "Abbot did not tell me that I must obtain Master Tam Yuan's inheritance. Why can't I watch?" Chapter 471. Ming Qi was rendered speechless by Zhong Xian's words. He did not know what to say. With Zhong Xian's personality not only in the outside world but also in the Great Light Temple, Zhong Xian could complete all the tasks given by the elders in the sect perfectly. However, as long as it was not part of the task, Zhong Xian would not even look at it even if the sky fell. Ming Qi did not know what to say to such a person. In any case, Zhong Xian's strength was obvious. No matter how eccentric Zhong Xian's personality was, his strength alone was enough to make him the successor of the Great Light Temple. Buddhist techniques were not meant to be mastered quickly, and the Great Light Temple's techniques placed the most emphasis on the foundation. However, Zhong Xian was able to reach the oneness of heaven and man realm before he was 30 years old, and his combat strength was close to the level of a martial Tao master. Such strength was extremely rare in the entire history of the Great Light Temple. At that moment, Fang Qishao also walked out of the small town outside the Dragon Beach with a pot of yellow wine in his hand. He looked like a sloppy person. Previously, he drank half a pot of yellow wine from Chu Xiu. Sword King City was located in the western region, and while the grape wine there was very famous, there was no yellow wine there. After tasting it, 7th young Master Fang was surprised to find that it tasted pretty good. He then filled a pot and prepared to leave. After all, he was already here. Now that he had shown up and made his presence known, his mission in Sword King City could be considered completed. At that moment, Fang Qishao also saw Zhong Xian and Ming Qi on the side of the road. He could not help but raise his head and snort coldly. Then, he used the long sword in his hand to carry the wine pot and walked in another direction. Ming Qi suddenly felt a little comforted when he saw Fang Qishao like this. Compared to Fang Qishao, Zhong Xian was considered more normal. At the very least, they did not have to worry about the sect's reputation being shamed. If the people of Sword King City knew that Fang Qishao behaved like this and did not have the aura of a young elite or the successor of Sword King City, they would probably go crazy with anger. However, Ming Qi didn't know that the people of Sword King City wouldn't go crazy because they were used to Fang Qishao's behavior. At this time, Ming Qi suddenly slapped his head. Now was not the time to think about these useless things. He hurriedly pulled Zhong Xian and said, "Martial nephew Zhong Xian, quickly go back. It might not be too late to stop Master Tam Yuan." The expression on Zhong Xian's face did not change as he allowed Ming Qi to pull him towards the small town of Dragon Beach. For Zhong Xian, these things didn't matter. Ming Qi came from the Karma Zen Hall, so his combat strength was inferior to him. However, because Ming Qi's seniority was higher than his, he was his martial uncle. Now that Ming Qi was preparing to organize Tan Yuan to pass on his cultivation to Chu Xiu, he would follow suit. Looking at the two figures, Fang Qishao's eyes showed a trace of doubt. He bit the mouth of the wine flask, took a big gulp and followed behind them. Fang Qishao was just bored and wanted to watch the show. His Karma Sword Dao was about comprehension, not practice. Therefore, for Fang Qishao, a long period of closed-door cultivation didn't have much effect on improving his cultivation except for accumulating his internal force. Therefore, the 7th young Master Fang spent most of his time wandering outside instead of cultivating in seclusion within the sect. Now that his realm was the same as Zhong Xian's, he was close to becoming a martial Dao Grandmaster, so he needed an epiphany. Therefore, he had been wandering around the Jianghu during this period. Now that he saw Zhong Xian's actions, Fang Qishao's intuition told him that there must be a show to watch, so he immediately followed them. At this time, at the entrance of the small towns in Long Tianying and several Cetacean Society revered elders were guarding the entrance, protecting Master Tam Yuan. Although Long Tianying was a businessman, he also knew what kindness and morality were. If it weren't for Master Tam Yuan's help in the past, his Cetacean Society would have been annexed by the 3 evil islands. How could it still have its current glory? Moreover, Long Tianying was not a martial Dao Grandmaster himself. It was very difficult for a Chamber of Commerce to recruit a martial Dao Grandmaster level guest revered elder. It was precisely because of Master Tam Yuan's words that the Cetacean Society did not make things difficult for people in Donghai and could develop to its current scale. Now that Master Tam Yuan was about to pass away, Long Tianying also wanted to send Master Tam Yuan on his last journey to fulfill his last wish. At this time, the crowd outside to watch the show was suddenly separated, and Zhong Xian and Ming Qi hurried over. Everyone present was stunned. What was Zhong Xian planning to do when he returned? That monk in white was also from the Great Light Temple? Ming Qi walked in front of Long Tianying and said, "I'm Ming Qi from the Karma Meditation Hall of the Great Light Temple. I would like to see Master Tam Yuan. Please make way." Long Tianying frowned slightly and said, "Master Tam Yuan is currently imparting his skills. Please wait for a moment, Master Ming Qi." Ming Qi immediately said, "It's precisely because of this that I want to see Master Tam Yuan. Chu Xiu has a bad reputation in the pugilistic world. He has committed all sorts of evil deeds and has a huge grudge against the Buddhist sections. We must not impart our skills to such an evil thief. Let me in, I'll definitely persuade Master Tam Yuan to rescind his order." Long Tianying's eyes revealed a hint of disdain when he heard that. Although he was indebted to Master Tam Yuan, in reality, Long Tianying did not have a good impression of monks, especially Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery, the two leaders of the Buddhist sections. In the past, when the East Sea was filled with chaos and slaughter, why didn't you all come to save us? It was only now that Master Tam Yuan's name has spread throughout the pugilistic world that you all came to welcome him. Master Tam Yuan was Master Tam Yuan, and the other monks were other monks. Long Tianying was very clear on this point. Therefore Long Tianying shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. Master Tam Yuan has ordered that no one is allowed to enter when he's imparting skills." Moreover, Chu Xiu was personally chosen by Master Tam Yuan as his successor. Be it Great Light Temple or Sabodhi Zen Monastery, they shouldn't have the right to interfere. Ming Qi's expression turned cold when he heard that. He snorted and said, "It's up to Master Tam Yuan whether he agrees or not. Get out of the way, I'll explain it to Master Tam Yuan personally." In front of Zhong Xian, Ming Qi's attitude was very amiable. He did not put on any airs of a senior or master at all. But in reality, Ming Qi was an elite disciple of the Karma Zen Hall, someone who would be heavily nurtured in the future. His status in the entire Great Light Temple was not low. Long Tianying was the leader of an overseas chamber of commerce. Normally, Ming Qi would not even be bothered with him. Why would he listen to his argument now? Seeing Ming Qi's attitude, Long Tianying shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, I won't let you in. Master Tam Yuan cannot be disturbed when he's imparting skills. As long as I'm here, no one can step into this inn." "You're so stubborn." Ming Qi snorted and slammed his palm at Long Tianying. In an instant, a seven-colored Buddha's light bloomed and was extremely dazzling. However, Long Tianying was not afraid at all. The Gang Qi around his body condensed into one. Like a tsunami, he punched out with a loud bang. The wind broke through the waves and its power was boundless. As the leader of the Cetacean Society, it was impossible for Long Tianying to only be in the realm and not have any combat power. It should be known that he had built the Cetacean Society from scratch. In the beginning he had fought with many people, so Long Tianying's combat power was not bad. He was actually evenly matched with Ming Qi. Of course, this did not mean that Long Tianying's strength was strong enough to compete with the martial artists of the Great Light Temple, but Ming Qi was a special case. He came from the Karma Zen Hall and majored in the Karma Zen Hall's secret future incarnation scripture. This technique was mainly about karma deduction and cultivating the state of mind. Although it was also helpful for one's own combat power, to exert its true power, one must wait until the realm of the martial Tao Grand Master. The current Ming Qi was too far behind, so he was tied with Long Tianying. If it were the monks of the Vajra Hall or the Dharma Hall, it was estimated that it would be very easy to deal with Long Tianying. Seeing that he could not take down Long Tianying, and Zhong Xian next to him was like a statue, Ming Qi was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. This Zhong Xian had no foresight at all. Seeing that he could not take down Long Tianying, would he not make a move? Did he have to shout it out and make it so embarrassing? In fact, Zhong Xian was really ready to make a move but not now. It was when Ming Qi was in danger. In Zhong Xian's way of thinking, Ming Qi was his martial uncle. If he was beaten to the point of vomiting blood and being injured, he should make a move. However, he was still fighting with others and it was very lively. If no one spoke in this situation, Zhong Xian would not be a busybody. However, at the moment, Ming Qi really had no way to deal with Long Tianying. He could only shout, "Zhong Xian, come and help me." As soon as these words were spoken, Ming Qi heard the discussions of the surrounding martial artists. They were all saying that he was useless. As a master's uncle, he actually had to ask for a disciple's nephew's help. Furthermore, a martial artist from the Great Light Temple actually had to fight 1 against 2. It was really too degrading. However, at the moment, Ming Qi just wanted to stop Master Tam Yuan from passing on his skills. He could not care so much. At this time, Zhong Xian had already made a move. Taking a step out, in an instant, Long Tianying felt dark clouds covering his head as if a storm was coming. A thick pressure had completely surrounded him. This change immediately made Long Tianying's expression change. Was the existence of the second on the Longhu leaderboard really so terrifying? This kind of aura was already comparable to a martial Dao Grandmaster. In fact, even in some martial Dao Grandmasters, Long Tianying had not felt such a terrifying aura like Zhong Xian's. A Wisdom King seal fell. It was a simple Wisdom King seal, but it suppressed everything. It was as if everything in this world would be completely torn apart and crushed into nothingness under this Wisdom King seal. Long Tianying shouted angrily and took a deep breath. In an instant, an endless amount of heaven and earth yuan qi was swallowed into his stomach. Then it merged with his own earth energy and suddenly exploded, forming a huge vortex-like cyclone that blasted towards Zhong Xian. World engulfing. However, this move of Long Tianying could not even block Zhong Xian for a breath's time. In an instant, the cyclone shattered and the earth energy was extinguished. Long Tianying was directly blown away by this seal and vomited blood. Chapter 472. They were both at the oneness of heaven and man realm, but Ming Qi and Long Tianying were evenly matched. Now that it was Zhong Xian's turn, Ming Qi could not even withstand one move, which showed how big the gap was. Long Tianying was also shocked. This was the first time he fought with a young talent on the Longhu list. Putting others aside, this Zhong Xian was definitely a monster, even more terrifying than some martial arts masters. Go. Block the door, don't let anyone in to disturb Master Tam Yuan. Long Tianying shouted at the other Cetacean Society guest chamberlains. Those martial artists at the oneness of heaven and man realm did not hesitate. Even in the face of Zhong Xian, an expert who was famous in the underworld and even seriously injured Long Tianying in one move, they did not hesitate to rush forward. It had to be said that the quality of these guest chamberlains recruited by Long Tianying was quite high. These people were all well-known martial artists in the East Sea. After they were recruited into the Cetacean Society, Long Tianying treated them like brothers and generously recruited them. So now at this critical moment, these guest chamberlains were willing to fight with their lives for Long Tianying. Zhong Xian was expressionless, but his hands did not stop at all. All kinds of bright king seals fell, and none of the martial artists at the oneness of heaven and man realm present could withstand one move from him. All of them were seriously injured and vomited blood by his seal. And as the fight went on, everyone could see that Zhong Xian did not want to kill people. He still held back. Otherwise, some of the weaker martial artists in the Cetacean Society were likely to be directly killed by his bright king seal. At this time in the room, Master Tam Yuan had completely passed on all his power and cultivation method to Chu Xiu. After the inheritance, although Master Tam Yuan did not die, and his appearance did not change much, Chu Xiu sensed an aura from him, an aura of decay. Master Tam Yuan was almost at the end of his rope. Chu Xiu stood up and bowed to Master Tam Yuan. Thank you, Master. This Ye Chu Xiu was from the bottom of his heart. After all, although he had obtained his strength and inheritance through deception, it could be said that Master Tam Yuan had willingly given it to him. Master Tam Yuan reluctantly waved his hand and said, "My last wish has been fulfilled. My purpose in returning to the Central Plains has been fulfilled. My mind is clear and I no longer have any thoughts. I should be the one thanking you, Chu." Chu Xiu remained silent. Sometimes it was better for people to be muddle-headed. If they saw everything too clearly, they would have many regrets. At this time, Chu Xiu looked outside the inn and said, "Master, how should we deal with the people from the Great Light Temple?" When they were imparting their cultivation methods, Chu Xiu and Master Tam Yuan had already noticed the commotion below. However, they were at a crucial moment and could not be disturbed. Therefore they did not show up. Master Tam Yuan sighed when he heard that. Back when I didn't go to the East Sea, there were only two sacred grounds of the Buddhist sects for all the Buddhist disciples in the world. One was the Great Light Temple of the Northern Buddhist sect, and the other was the Subodhi Monastery of the Southern Buddhist sect. Because of the cultivation method I cultivate, I've always treated the Great Light Temple as the sacred ground in my heart. I've always dreamed of going to the Great Light Temple. However, as time passed, this desire became weaker and weaker. In the end, I no longer had any interest in going to the Great Light Temple. Under the bright Buddhist light, there is no room for any darkness. I don't know when it started, but the Great Light Temple has changed. They've become extreme and arrogant. They only care about strengthening their Buddhist light so that the light can suppress more darkness. However, they've never thought about how to completely find the source of the darkness instead of blindly suppressing it. Seeing the sacred ground of the Buddhist sects in the past, the place of his dreams, turn into such a state that was filled with interests and schemes, Master Tam Yuan could not help but sigh in his heart. Chushio was not as emotional as Master Tam Yuan. He merely said calmly, "Master, there's one thing you're wrong about. If there's no darkness, how can there be light? Everything needs to be compared. Perhaps the Great Light Temple itself does not want this darkness to be completely destroyed." Master Tam Yuan was stunned. What Chushio said made some sense, but it was a little too extreme. Although Master Tam Yuan felt that the Great Light Temple's actions were a little too realistic, the other party should not be that dark. Sighing again, Master Tam Yuan said, "Chu, go and settle the rest. I can't fight anymore and I can't stop them." Chushio nodded and walked straight out the door. Meanwhile, below, the Cetacean Society guests that Long Tianying had brought with him did not last long. They were already heavily injured and defeated by Zhong Xian. Almost all of them had lost their ability to fight. Seeing that Zhong Xian and Ming Qi were about to step into the inn, Long Tianying forced himself to stand up and stood in front of the two of them. This time, even the onlookers were a little surprised. This Long Tianying was really something. At this time, he still dared to stand in front of Zhong Xian and Ming Qi. Was this person really not afraid of death? Zhong Xian said calmly, "Move aside." Long Tianying clenched his teeth and shook his head. "The Great Light Temple is so overbearing. Aren't you afraid of attracting criticism?" Ming Qi frowned and snorted. "Overbearing?" "Since the Great Light Temple is the leader of the Buddhist sects, we can't just watch as our Buddhist martial arts fall into the hands of outsiders. Don't forget, you're just an outsider. Since you don't know how to appreciate kindness, then don't blame me for being ruthless." As soon as he finished speaking, Ming Qi immediately prepared to make a move and finish off Long Tianying completely. The Great Light Temple had never been afraid of outsiders calling them overbearing. This was because the way the Great Light Temple did things was already very overbearing. They did not care what others said. However, just as he was about to make a move, a flash of a knife roared out from inside the inn. As the flash of the knife approached, boundless demonic energy mixed with the power of blood suddenly descended. The powerful demonic energy from the knife swept across dozens of feet and even enveloped the entire long street. The knife slashed down and a murderous intent rose. As the knife slashed down, Ming Qi could even faintly hear the cries of evil spirits. It was abnormally horrifying. With such terrifying demonic energy, if Ming Qi did not know who was inside, he would even suspect that there was a peerless demon living inside. Raising both palms, an endless Buddhist light bloomed. However, under the demonic knife, the Buddhist light was easily extinguished, just like how Zhong Xian had crushed Long Tianying with ease. Just as Ming Qi was about to be killed by the knife, Zhong Xian also moved. The sound of Buddhist chanting came from all around him. His body, which seemed to be cast from steel, now bloomed with an even more dazzling golden Buddhist light. A seal blasted out. Vajra subduing demons, shattering mountains and rivers. Guardian Deity Seal. With a loud bang, Zhong Xian directly stood in front of Ming Qi and used the Guardian Deity Seal to block Chushio's knife. As the powerful Gang Qi dispersed, a deep white mark was left on Zhong Xian's palm. However, strangely, there was no blood flowing out. Chushio walked out of the inn with his knife in hand. His black robes fluttered in the wind that had yet to dissipate. At this moment, the aura around his body was in harmony with the heavens and the earth, looking extremely mysterious. Everyone could also see that Chushio had already stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. Previously, when the martial arts practitioners in the underworld talked about the Longhu leaderboard, they would discuss the top 5 and the top 10 and so on. After all, to most people, only the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard could be said to be on the same level. This was because those who could be ranked in the top 5 were all existences in the unity of heaven and man realm. Now that Chushio had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, they would probably not be discussing the top 5 but the top 6. Looking at Ming Qi and Zhong Xian, Chushio laughed coldly and said, "In terms of strength, Master Tam Yuan has already passed it on to me. I have also learned the techniques." "What? Now that the Great Light Temple has an opinion, do you still want to go back?" What a joke. Master Tam Yuan is Master Tam Yuan, and the Great Light Temple is the Great Light Temple. What right do you have to interfere with Master Tam Yuan's decision? Isn't the Great Light Temple being a little too involved? Do you really think that you are the leader of the Buddhist sects in the world, and that all the martial arts practitioners in the Buddhist sects have to listen to the Great Light Temple? As these words were said, many of the Buddhist martial arts practitioners present felt a little unnatural. The Buddhist sects in the world respected the Great Light Temple and Subodhi Zen Monastery. Everyone knew this and they had always done so. However, being respected was being respected. What the Great Light Temple did today was indeed a little overbearing. Although they did not approve of Master Tam Yuan passing down the techniques to Chu Xiu, Master Tam Yuan was a holy monk recognized by the entire underworld. His status was not lower than the Great Light Temples. Even if Master Tam Yuan was planning to pass down the techniques to Chu Xiu, even if he was planning to pass down the techniques to the remnants of the demonic cult, the others would not be able to say anything. Now that the Great Light Temple had such an attitude towards Master Tam Yuan, what would they do if something happened in the future? This made everyone present feel a little uncomfortable. Ming Qi frowned. He suddenly realized that he did not have the slightest advantage when it came to arguing with Chu Xiu. This guy's ability to invert right and wrong and pester people endlessly was not inferior to his strength. Ming Qi was targeting him, but now that Chu Xiu had said this, it became the Great Light Temple that was extremely overbearing and targeting Master Tam Yuan. Therefore, Ming Qi rationally did not want to waste any more time with Chu Xiu. He said coldly to Zhongxian, "Zhongxian, do it?" This Chu Xiu used some unknown method to deceive Master Tam Yuan and obtain the inheritance. Our Great Light Temple cannot sit back and watch Master Tam Yuan's inheritance fall into the hands of such a despicable person. Even if you have the inheritance, you must hand it over now. Ming Qi knew about the grudge between Chu Xiu and the Great Light Temple in the past. In the end, it was Su Yun, the master of Karma Zen Hall, who spoke up to settle it. However, Ming Qi did not care about Su Yun's words. Although the Karma Zen Hall strength was not as strong as Karma Zen Hall, its status was more important than Karma Zen Hall. Karma Zen Hall's strength was only because of its master, Su Yun, while the Karma Zen Hall's importance to the Great Light Temple was because of the Karma Zen Hall itself. Chapter 473. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and looked at Zhongxian. He did not expect that he would have to fight with Zhongxian again so soon. In fact, although Ming Qi from the Great Light Temple was overbearing, what he said was true. Chu Xiu's power inheritance was obtained through deception. However, with Chu Xiu's character, how could he spit out the things that entered his mouth? He did not have such a habit. Therefore, this battle was inevitable and Chu Xiu was willing to accompany him. Chu Xiu had just stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. Normally, he would need to retreat for a period of time to familiarize himself with his realm. However, for the current Chu Xiu, it was much faster to familiarize himself with his realm when fighting with someone than when he was in seclusion. Especially when his opponent was Zhongxian, the same Zhongxian who had previously given Chu Xiu a lot of pressure. On the other side, Zhongxian paused after hearing Ming Qi's words. However, he also stood up. In fact, Zhongxian did not want to fight because it was meaningless. Zhongxian's character was more stubborn, but he was not an idiot. He could think. In front of so many people, Master Tam Yuan had already passed on his power and cultivation technique to Chu Xiu. Even if they forced Chu Xiu to hand over the cultivation technique, what was the use? What the Great Light Temple really wanted was not the cultivation technique, but Master Tam Yuan's reputation. Therefore, if they were to make a move now, they would only be able to earn some useless reputation. In fact, there was not much meaning to it. However, Ming Qi was his master uncle and Zhongxian's elder. Since he had spoken, Zhongxian would not refuse as long as it did not affect the overall situation. With a step forward, the Buddha light around Zhongxian had condensed to the extreme, making him look like a god or a demon. The Wisdom King seal fell, but this time it was not an ordinary Wisdom King seal. It was the Wrath Wisdom King seal. The Buddha flame rose and suppressed everything. Chu Xiu, who had stepped into the oneness of heaven and man realm, was completely different from the previous Chu Xiu. Even if they had not officially fought, Zhongxian could feel the gap between them. Therefore he used all his strength in this attack. The demonic aura in Chu Xiu's eyes rose, and he also took a step forward. In an instant, demonic flames soared into the sky. Taking another step forward, the blood-refined god aura soared into the sky, transforming into a blood-colored blade that coiled around the blade. Taking the third step, Chu Xiu's body was completely enveloped in a killing intent. Entering the selfless killing state, there was nothing in the world that he could not kill. Chu Xiu continuously unleashed his strongest state, stirring the winds and clouds around him. Strands of power passively seeped into Chu Xiu's body. This was a completely different realm. Taisheng Wang Qing. This heaven and earth did not have any attributes to begin with. Devils could survive in this heaven and earth, and Buddhas could also shine under the sun. Therefore, how much power of heaven and earth Chushio could draw over depended entirely on how high his compatibility with this heaven and earth was. He was a devil and this heaven and earth was a devil. As the blade slashed down, boundless evil ghosts wailed, as if the gates of hell had opened, making people feel extremely creepy and evil. At this time, the blade intent of the Avicii three blades had already seeped into Chushio's bones. The incomparably evil blade collided with Zhong Xian's angry Akalanatha seal, and in an instant, a strong wave broke out. The demonic aura and Buddha's flames splashed everywhere, and a series of violent explosions came one after another. The powerful force made everyone's expression change. They had just exchanged blows, but the surrounding ground had already begun to crack, and the entire long street had become a mess. If these two people continued to fight, perhaps a small town would be destroyed by these two people. Amidst the boundless demonic flames, Zhong Xian's body was shrouded in Buddha's light. Facing the slash of Chushio's blade aura, he slashed down one after another with the Akalanatha seal, directly and violently colliding with Chushio's blade aura. Chushio's hands did not stop. Under the selfless killing realm, all the gang chi in his body condensed on the blade. The demonic blade slashed wildly, and in an instant he had already slashed out hundreds of times. The sky was filled with demonic aura and blade aura, and it almost covered the sun. The fight between these two people was simple and violent to the extreme. They were completely relying on their own strength to fight head-on. It was just that one was unintentional while the other was intentional. Zhong Xian's fighting style had always been like this, crushing all along the way and extremely powerful. And Chushio was not only good at brute force. At this time he was only doing this to hone his own realm's strength. However, in the collision between the Akalanatha seal and the demonic blade, everyone also discovered that Zhong Xian still had the upper hand. Chushio's figure did not retreat, but Zhong Xian faced Chushio's blade aura head-on and moved forward. The powerful demonic blade was either shattered by his Akalanatha seal, or he used his body to resist some of the aftershocks, and he did not suffer the slightest injury. Zhong Xian was not only terrifyingly strong, but even his physical body was so strong that it was almost abnormal. It was no wonder that Fang Qishao called Zhong Xian a freak. If Chushio's powerful demonic aura blade aura had slashed on other martial artists in the unity of heaven and man realm, that person would probably have been immediately sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth. The weaker ones might even have been killed directly. But what if it had slashed on Zhong Xian? It only left a white mark, and the damage caused to Zhong Xian could be said to be negligible. Seeing this scene, Fang Qishao, who was watching the battle from the crowd, could not help but look serious. Zhong Xian's cultivation level was even stronger than before. The first time Chushio fought with Zhong Xian had not used his full strength. It was only now that Zhong Xian had revealed his full cultivation level. Zhong Xian's reputation in the underworld was based on his Akalanatha seal, which was ever-changing and immeasurably powerful. However, in reality the Akalanatha seal was not considered a top-notch peerless technique in the Great Light Temple. It could only be considered not bad. However, Fang Qishao knew that the physique tempering technique that Zhong Xian cultivated was one of the strongest among the many physique tempering techniques in the Great Light Temple. It was a peerless technique that surpassed the 9 transformations, the Moonlight King's glazed golden body. Although this technique was a secret peerless technique of the Great Light Temple, it was not very famous in the underworld because very few people could successfully cultivate it. The Moonlight King's glazed golden body was a glazed Light King Buddha form that refined one's body like a weapon. The glazed Light King would evolve the indestructible glazed pure land in one's body. When cultivated to the end, one's body would not be indestructible, but it would be like Vajra glazed, impervious to all spells and repelling all evil. Furthermore, the Moonlight King's azure glass golden body had a miraculous healing effect. Even if one were to suffer a serious injury during a battle, with the power of the alchemist Azure Glass Light Buddha Lord, he would be able to recover at the fastest speed possible. Therefore, those who fought with Zhong Xian, even if they had the upper hand in the early stages, would definitely be a nightmare in the later stages. However, although this technique was powerful, it had extremely high requirements for the cultivator's aptitude and willpower. It could even be said that it was indispensable. Those with aptitude could not withstand the pain of refining one's body like refining a weapon, and those who could withstand such pain did not have the aptitude. Therefore, in the past 1,000 years, Zhong Xian was the only one who could successfully cultivate the Moonlight King's glazed golden body. When Zhong Xian faced Chushio, he had already unleashed his physical cultivation to the extreme. He pushed all the way to Chushio and another Wisdom King seal landed. Its power was unparalleled. The mighty Wisdom King seal. When the seal landed, it was like a five-fingered mountain crashing down. The pressure it brought to Chushio made it hard for him to breathe. At that moment, Chushio retracted his sword and formed a seal. The sun, moon, and stars rotated in his eyes. He had unleashed the heaven's sun gazing at air to its extreme, but it was still useless. Was Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal really flawless? Otherwise, under Chushio's heaven's sun gazing at air, he could see several loopholes, but it was still useless. Even if Chushio attacked these loopholes in the face of absolute power, he would still be unable to defeat Zhongxian's Wisdom King seal. And if he wanted to escape, Zhongxian's aura had already sealed off all escape routes for Chushio. As long as Chushio retreated and escaped, Zhongxian's attack would definitely pour down. Therefore, Chushio could only face it head-on. The Wisdom Fist seal exploded. Earth energy condensed and covered the sky. But under Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal, the Wisdom Fist seal was directly shattered. Instead of retreating, Chushio advanced. The perfect Aquarius seal, the Great Vajra Wheel seal, and the Sun Wheel seal came crashing down. 3 seals were unleashed consecutively, and the power of the 3 seals stacked together to collide with Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal. With a loud explosion, a pit of over 30 meters was blasted under the feet of the 2 of them. Even the soil was turned into dust by the powerful earth energy storm. A huge force attacked, and Chushio could not help but feel a sharp pain in his arm. The web between his thumb and forefinger split open and blood spilled out. In terms of power, even if Chushio had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, he was still inferior to Zhongxian. The effect of the Great Vajra divine powers and body tempering techniques was not bad, but it was just not bad. On the other hand, the Lunar Treasure Light King Azure Golden Body that Zhongxian cultivated was a peerless technique that surpassed the 9 transformations. Even in the Great Light Temple, it was a top-notch existence. The difference between the 2 was not small. Just as Zhongxian's eyes were full of Buddha's light and he was about to attack again, Chushio's eyes suddenly turned into a dark abyss. It was boundless and it swallowed Zhongxian's Buddha's light, instantly pulling him into it. In an instant, countless ferocious evil spirits bit and pulled at Zhongxian from under his feet, as if they wanted to pull him into the abyss of the netherworld. Besides Zhongxian, there were countless pink mists surrounding him, and there were Azura goddesses dancing. They were naked, and their expressions were enchanting and extremely seductive. In the sky, there were countless gods and Buddhas that appeared, glaring at Zhongxian angrily. They scolded him for deceiving his master, destroying his ancestors, and not respecting the precepts. These illusions were like a dream, and it was impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. This move was a spiritual illusion created by Chushio's combination of the great art of mental demons rotation and the great art of extinguishing earth extinguishing and soul shifting. The great art of mental demons rotation used mental energy to attack the opponent's heart and break their state of mind, which was evil and strange. On the other hand, the great art of extinguishing earth extinguishing and soul shifting used mental energy to forcefully invade the opponent's mind, which was overbearing and ruthless. At this moment, Chushio combined the 2 together. While it affected Zhongxian's state of mind, it was also eroding his mental energy. Chapter 474. Among the techniques that Chushio possessed, the Great Inner Demon Rotation Technique and the 9 forms of Soul Catcher were the ones that Chushio was unwilling to reveal in front of outsiders. After all, these 2 techniques were authentic Kunlun Devil Cult martial arts. Although very few people knew about them, Chushio could not guarantee that no one would be able to recognize them. Right now, Chushio's identity and his identity as a member of the Kunlun demon sect were both in the light and in the dark. Chushio didn't wish to reveal his identity so early on. Therefore, Chushio rarely used these 2 techniques. Even if he did, he would only choose a martial art that did not have obvious external characteristics. Just like the silk soul net that Chushio had used when he schemed against Iron Sword sect's Zheng Qingyong, its external characteristics were not obvious. This great inner demon rotation technique, which was directly combined with the great soul shifting technique of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth, was the same. Other than Zhongxian himself, outsiders would not be able to see any special characteristics. At that moment in the boundless illusion, the Buddhist light in Zhongxian's eyes dimmed. He really did not expect this move from Chushio. All along, when Chushio fought with him, the martial arts that he had displayed leaned towards the fierce and overbearing type. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would actually use such an evil primordial spirit secret technique? Given Zhong Xian's character, he would not even bother to understand information about Chu Xiu. It should be said that Zhong Xian would not understand any opponent's information. Moreover, even if he knew that Chu Xiu was proficient in primordial spirit secret techniques, so what? In any case, for Zhong Xian, no matter what he faced, there was only one way to deal with it, and that was to directly crush it. Zhong Xian's hands formed a strange hand seal. Compared to the fierce and imposing Wisdom King seal, this hand seal actually gave off an extremely gentle feeling. In an instant, the Buddhist light in Zhong Xian's eyes shone brightly again. Behind him, an illusion of the medicine-glazed light Buddha Lord appeared, sitting on a lotus platform with a solemn expression. Break! Zhong Xian calmly spat out a single word. In an instant, a boundless power of blood and qi shot up into the sky. The reason why essence spirit mystic techniques were strange was that there were very few ways to deal with essence spirit mystic techniques. Either you were proficient in essence soul mystic arts to begin with, then you could withstand the collision head-on. Otherwise, he would completely rely on his own powerful vital energy and blood to deal with the impact of the essence soul mystic technique. Those with strong qi and blood would have stable and resolute psyche power. Naturally, they would have a strong resistance to psyche power impacts. This was also the reason why some of the evil creatures in the forest would often find some thin and weak ordinary people, and not some martial arts experts. However, using such a method to deal with essence soul mystic arts could only be described in one word: forcefully resisting. He could only passively defend, unable to counterattack. But now, Zhong Xian was telling everyone that when one's vital qi and blood reached a certain level, it could also counteract one's spiritual power. Just like what was happening right now. As the power of blood and blood burst forth, those evil ghosts were all smashed into smithereens. The Shura goddess wailed in anguish and dissipated. Even the gods and Buddhas that filled the skies let out cries of indignation before finally disappearing. Taking another step forward, the darkness before him was torn apart. Zhong Xian didn't even bother to take a look as he sent out yet another bright ruler seal. Zhong Xian's prediction was right. The moment Chu Xiu pulled Zhong Xian into that illusion, he had already decided to strike. Chu Xiu didn't choose to use his full strength to activate that illusion. This was because he knew that against an existence of Zhong Xian's level, even if he used his full strength, it would be useless. He might as well use it to delay the other party for a period of time. In reality, that was indeed the case. That illusion didn't even delay Zhong Xian for a breath's time before it was broken by him. But to Chu Xiu this was enough. At this instant, Buddha's light shone brightly around Chu Xiu, and a Vairocana Dharma form appeared behind him. As Chu Xiu formed hand seals, his figure and the Vairocana Dharma form became more and more compatible. Chu Xiu placed his right hand in front of his chest, forming the fearless seal. His Dharma form was solemn. In an instant, endless light bloomed. The blood in Chu Xiu's body seemed to be boiling, burning with a scorching Buddha's flame. It turned into the power of Vairocana Dharma form and released countless Buddha's light that shrouded Zhong Xian. Sun-changing technique. Seizing the fortune of heaven and earth, stealing the sky and changing the sun. Its power was limitless. Moreover, this sun-changing technique wasn't the original version of the sun-changing technique. Instead, it was the sun-changing technique that Master Tam Yuan had developed after comprehending and evolving it. Now that he had been imparted by Master Tam Yuan, Chu Xiu could use 80% of the power of the sun-changing technique. Therefore, while its power was strong, Chu Xiu almost couldn't control this powerful technique. Bathed in the endless Buddha's light, Zhong Xian's Wisdom King seal shattered for the first time. This was the first time it was shattered by Chu Xiu head-on. Raising his head to look at the Vairocana Dharma form that was shining with resplendent Buddha's flame, Zhong Xian chose to be on the defensive for the first time. The Buddha's light around him dissipated, and in its place, a cold moonlight appeared. The alchemist Vairocana light Buddha's Dharma form appeared behind him. It was much clearer than the Vairocana Dharma form behind Chu Xiu. Amidst the flawless moonlight, the alchemist Vairocana light Buddha's Dharma form formed a dhyana seal. A strange power was emitted. It wasn't earth chi, but it wasn't heaven and earth energy either. However, this power circled around Zhong Xian's body, causing the Vairocana light Buddha's sun-changing technique to shine even brighter. It was actually going against Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique. One was the sun and the other was the moonlight. However, neither of them gave way. At the side, Ming Qi's eyes flashed with anxiety when he saw this. He had never imagined that Chu Xiu would actually become so powerful after obtaining Master Tan Yuan's inheritance. He was actually able to fight with Zhong Xian to such an extent. This caused Ming Qi to be unable to help but become anxious. Zhong Xian couldn't lose. To the Great Light Temple, Zhong Xian was the face of the Great Light Temple. There were many young talents in the world who respected Taoism and Buddhism. Other than Zhang Qingzhen of the Celestial Master's abode, Zhong Xian couldn't lose to anyone, let alone Chu Xiu, who was several ranks lower than Zhong Xian. This time, the Great Light Temple only wanted to obtain Master Tam Yuan's legacy and make a fuss in the East Sea. However, the one who made Zhong Xian attack Chu Xiu was Ming Qi. If anything happened to Zhong Xian this time, he would be the one to be severely punished when he returned to the Great Light Temple. Ming Qi gritted his teeth. A weak Buddha's light bloomed in his hands. His 10 fingers formed various hand seals and he quickly deduced. This was the Great Light Temple's triple reincarnation's future scripture. It was said that when cultivated to its peak, one could even deduce the future of 3 lifetimes. In theory, it was similar to Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air. However, Chu Xiu's sun gazing at air was a secret scripture of Taoism. Its main use was still in combat. It could only see what was in front of one's eyes and could not see other futures. It could not be used for divination, but at the same time, the speed of the sun gazing at air far exceeded that of the triple reincarnation's future scripture. There was no need for such complicated hand seals to deduce. At this time, Ming Qi was using all his strength to deduce the flaws on Chu Xiu's side. He was prepared to intervene later. Zhong Xian's expression had always been like that of a statue. Ming Qi couldn't tell if he had the upper hand or if he wasn't. So, for safety's sake, even if others said that Ming Qi's sneak attack was shameless, he still had to intervene. But at this moment, a beam of sword qi blasted behind him, giving Ming Qi a huge fright. It also interrupted Ming Qi's deduction. Ming Qi looked behind him and saw Fang Qishao, who was holding a wine pot and looking like he was watching the show. He could not help but say angrily, "Fang Qishao, what is the meaning of this?" Fang Qishao spread his hands and said, "It's fair. They're fighting so well, so why do you have to intervene? If you have the time, why don't you deduce if you will be punished when you return to the Great Light Temple? That way you can be prepared." Ming Qi was so angry that his eyebrows twitched. He shouted in a low voice, "Fang Qishao, the Great Light Temple has no enmity with you, and Chu Xiu also has enmity with your Sword King city. Are you crazy? Why are you helping Chu Xiu?" Fang Qishao shook his head with a serious expression and said, "I'm not helping Chu Xiu. I'm just watching the show. You can't interrupt such a wonderful show. This is a warning. Next time, I'd like to see if your triple lifetimes future sutra is faster or if my karma sword path is faster." It was rare for Fang Qishao to be serious. Although he seemed to be looking for an excuse, he was actually telling the truth. He was really watching the show. As the third person on the Longhu list, Fang Qishao had fought with Zhong Xian before. However, he had been at a disadvantage. Perhaps it was because he wanted to save face, or perhaps it was because he was not confident. Fang Qishao almost never fought with Zhong Xian again after he was at a disadvantage. However, Zhong Xian had used his full strength when he fought with Chu Xiu this time. Watching their fight would be beneficial to Fang Qishao, who was in the same realm as them. Therefore he could not let Ming Qi ruin everything. When Ming Qi saw Fang Qishao's expression, he was so angry that his face turned red. However, he did not dare to make another move. Ming Qi knew how terrifying Zhong Xian was, and it was needless to say how terrifying Fang Qishao, who was only one rank lower than Zhong Xian, was. While Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian were still in a stalemate, a sigh was heard from the inn. "Sigh, let's stop. Everyone from the Great Light Temple, I was the one who chose my successor. I'm already so old. Don't tell me I don't even have the right to choose my own successor?" Master Tam Yuan walked out of the inn slowly with a helpless look on his face. He had thought that since Chu Xiu had appeared, it meant that the inheritance had been completed, and the people from the Great Light Temple would retreat. However, he did not expect them to still want to make a move. It had been a long time since he stepped into the Central Plains, and the Great Light Temple had become completely different from what he remembered. Perhaps Master Tam Yuan had never really understood what the Great Light Temple was, because at that time, he did not have the right to come into contact with the real Great Light Temple with his abilities and status. Chapter 475. As Master Tam Yuan spoke up, Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian could no longer continue fighting. After all, Master Tam Yuan was about to die. If the Great Light Temple were to force him to take back the technique that he had passed to Chu Xiu, it would be too much. Hence, Ming Qi could only pinch his nose and say, "Zhong Xian, stop fighting. Stop." However, this time, Zhong Xian did not listen to Ming Qi's order to stop immediately. Instead, his eyes shone brightly and he only stopped after a while. Fang Qishao, who was at the back, stroked his chin. After Chu Xiu entered the unity of heaven and man realm, his combat power was not weak at all. He could actually force Zhong Xian into a serious state. However, it was obvious that Chu Xiu had lost this round. After Zhong Xian retracted his hand, the radiance of the sun around Chu Xiu also dissipated. However, his face had already turned pale. The power of the sun-changing technique was not something that Chu Xiu could use as he wished. If he did not control the power of the sun-changing technique well, he would only end up hurting himself and others. Meanwhile, on Zhong Xian's side, he had only just started to get serious. If Master Tam Yuan did not show up, the person who would lose in the end would still be Chu Xiu. Ming Qi's expression was a little ugly as he cupped his hands at Master Tam Yuan and said, "Master Tam Yuan, you're the publicly recognized holy monk of the Buddhist sect. We naturally can't control who you want to pass the technique to. However, this Chu Xiu has a ferocious reputation. If he were to use the cultivation technique you taught him to do something evil in the future, then the karma will be placed on you, and it will ruin your reputation in the future. I'm doing this for your own good." Master Tan Yuan smiled and said, "This old monk appreciates the kindness of the Temple of Great Light, but let's talk about the future in the future. Karma is such a complicated thing, so how can you and I see through it now? As for my reputation, the so-called title of holy monk is also something that was forcefully added because of everyone's love for me. It doesn't matter if it's ruined. At that time, I'm afraid this old monk will already be a pile of bones. Would I still need to care about my reputation?" Hearing Master Tam Yuan's words, Ming Qi could only put on a gloomy expression as he reluctantly cupped his hands to bid farewell and turned to leave. Seeing Ming Qi's attitude, Chu Xiu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The Temple of Great Light was really used to being domineering. They actually sent such a person over. They were simply asking for trouble. Although Master Tan Yuan was alone, he still had the reputation of a holy monk. Not only was he recognized by Buddhism, but he was also a holy monk recognized by the entire martial arts world. The Temple of Great Light could be domineering to others, but to be so domineering to a person like Master Tam Yuan who was about to die, was basically ruining their own reputation. This Ming Qi came from the Temple of Great Light's Karma Hall. Forget about the martial arts world, even in the Temple of Great Light, the Karma Hall status was very high. It could even be said that in the Temple of Great Light, although the Karma Hall's combat power was not the strongest, their status was extraordinary. If the Temple of Great Light had only sent Ming Qi, it would have been fine. But in the end they sent Zhong Xian, who was stubborn and did not know how to be flexible. In the end, it was not surprising that things had escalated to such a state. After Zhong Xian and Ming Qi left, Master Tam Yuan walked towards Long Tianying and the others. He sighed and said, "President Long, I've implicated you." Long Tianying hurriedly shook his head and said, "Don't say that, Master. It's just a small matter. Not to mention that we only suffered some minor injuries. Even if we had to risk our lives to stop the people from the Temple of Great Light, it would be worth it." Master Tam Yuan shook his head and said, "I'm already at the end of my rope, but President Long, you're still young. Don't talk about dying. Now that my wish has been fulfilled, I'm ready to return to my hometown. President Long, please go back." Long Tianying hurriedly shook his head and said, "I won't forget the kindness you've shown me in the past. The development of the Cetacean Society is already on the right track. It's fine for me to be away for a while. I hope Master can let me send you on your last journey." Hearing Long Tianying say that, Master Tam Yuan did not stop him. He only turned around to look at Chu Xiu and said, "Chu, I haven't been to the Central Plains for a long time. Can I trouble you to send me back to my hometown?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "It's my duty." Although he had obtained the cultivation method by deceiving Master Tam Yuan, Chu Xiu naturally would not refuse such a request. Just as Master Tam Yuan was about to leave, he suddenly saw Fang Qishao, who was also about to leave with a flagon of wine. Master Tam Yuan suddenly asked, "Young friend, please wait a moment. May I ask if you're from Sword King City?" Fang Qishao said somewhat gloomily, "Yes, what orders do you have for me, Master?" Just now, he had represented Sword King City in the crowd to present a gift to Master Tam Yuan. However, it seemed like Master Tam Yuan did not remember anything. Perhaps he had never paid attention to him from the beginning. To think that he, the dignified sword leader 7th young Master Fang, would one day be ignored by others. This was not a good feeling. Master Tam Yuan seemed to have seen through Fang Qishao's thoughts. He smiled and said, "Please don't blame me, young friend. When I came ashore, this old monk was focused on inheriting my martial arts. Because I don't have much time left, I was a bit anxious and didn't care about other things. Hearing Master Tam Yuan's words, Fang Qishao felt a little embarrassed. He waved his hand and said, "I don't blame you, Master." Smiling, Master Tan Yuan took out a jade slip from his bosom and handed it to the seventh young master. "This is a secret manual of the way of the sword that I obtained by accident. It is a manual left behind by a large sect of the way of the sword in the Eastern Sea thousands of years ago. There are only a few scattered sword techniques, but there is no complete sword technique. However, there are even more comprehensions left behind by the experts of the large sect. I believe that this thing will be very useful to you." Seventh young master Fang took the jade slip with a surprised look on his face. This thing was more than useful to him. It was simply a treasure. For Fang Qishao, who came from Sword King City, he did not lack sword arts. His karma sword Dao did not need those messy sword arts. However, he could use other people's knowledge to improve himself. Things like sword practice experiences left behind by these ancient powerhouses were the most precious. After reading these things, it would definitely bring another level of understanding to his entire sword Dao. Fang Qishao asked hesitantly, "Master, why are you giving me this thing?" Master Tam Yuan smiled freely and said, "I've obtained a lot of good things in the Eastern Sea over the years. I've already given what I can to others. Now that I'm about to pass away, these things can't be brought with me when I'm alive and I can't take them with me when I die. It's useless for me to keep them. Little friend, you came from Sword King City. This thing will definitely be much more valuable to you than to be buried with an old man like me." Compared to other martial artists who viewed their martial arts inheritance as incomparably important, to the point that even if they died, they would take it with them to the underworld, Master Tan Yuan's view of martial arts was much more open-minded, and he even viewed it as an external object. Fang Qishao asked in surprise, "Master, aren't you afraid that I'll do something evil after obtaining this thing and destroy it?" After saying that, Fang Qishao glanced at Chu Xiu. He didn't think that Chu Xiu was a good person. Ming Qi's words actually made sense. Master Tam Yuan shook his head and said, "I've said it before. Good and evil can't be judged on the surface. If a person wants to do evil, even if he doesn't have the slightest bit of strength, he can slaughter millions of people with just his mouth. Similarly, some people seem to kill a lot of people but they can save even more people. Therefore, this old monk might as well bet that little friend won't let this old monk down. This sword arts record will definitely be more cost-effective to give to the descendants of the 5 great sword sects than to be buried with this old monk." There were so many experts in Jianghu, but there weren't many who could be as open-minded as Master Tan Yuan. This was also because Master Tan Yuan really didn't have the time. Otherwise, he would definitely find a suitable person to hand over all the things he had on him. At this moment, Fang Qishao also became serious for once. He put the sword back on his back and bowed to Master Tam Yuan. "Thank you, Master." After a pause, Fang Qishao added, "I dare not forget your kindness in teaching me. I'll go with you to send you on your last journey, Master." Master Tam Yuan did not stop him. He just nodded and said, "That's good too. The more the merrier. I didn't expect so many people to send me off before I die." Master Tam Yuan's hometown was Songping Prefecture in eastern Qi's Changyang County. It was located in the hinterland of eastern Qi and was more than 10 days away from Donghai County. And now, Master Tam Yuan's body was about to decay. He might not even be able to hold on for more than 20 hours, let alone 10 days. But perhaps Master Tam Yuan's obsession to see his hometown again, Master Tam Yuan managed to hold on for more than 10 days. Finally, he arrived at a dilapidated temple outside Songping Prefecture, Xuanji Temple. Xuanji Temple was just a small temple. Even when Master Tam Yuan was still alive, there were only a dozen monks in Xuanji Temple. But now all the monks had left and there was not a single person left. It was either destroyed, or the temple had no successor and had completely withered. But looking at the well-preserved appearance of the temple, it should be the latter. Touching the dusty Buddha statue in Xuanji Temple, Master Tam Yuan let out a long sigh. He traveled to the east in his middle age and returned at the end of his life. He had experienced countless storms. For Master Tam Yuan, he had experienced hardships and confusion in his life, but he had never regretted it. When he first came to the East Sea, he might have only wanted to spread Buddhism and promote the name of Buddhism. But in the end, those superficial meanings disappeared. Everything Master Tam Yuan did had nothing to do with Buddhism. It was just his belief. Sitting on the dirty futon in front of the Buddha statue, Master Tam Yuan closed his eyes. In an instant, the seven-colored light of Buddha shrouded Master Tam Yuan. A majestic power bloomed and drifted between heaven and earth, as if Master Tam Yuan had really become a Buddha. But at this time Long Tianying's eyes were red. Fang Qishao and Chu Xiu were also silent. This was not becoming a Buddha but returning to the dust. Warriors were born between heaven and earth and refined the qi of heaven and earth into their bodies. Now that they had passed away, this power naturally had to be returned to heaven and earth. In the 69th year of Yonghe in Eastern Qi, holy monk Tan Yuan passed away in Xuanji Temple in Songping Prefecture. He was born here and died here. Chapter 476. After Master Tam Yuan passed away, it was Chu Xiu and the others who buried Master Tam Yuan. Generally speaking, the martial artists of the great Guangming Temple were used to leaving behind saraira after they passed away. Not only did they want to be worshipped by their descendants, but they also wanted to integrate their own strength into the saraira, so that they could use the last bit of strength for their disciples. Tan Yuan did not have a disciple. Although Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao had received Master Tam Yuan's cultivation method, it could only be considered as teaching and not preaching. Therefore, Master Tam Yuan did not leave behind any saraira, but directly dispersed all the strength in his body, returning to the Eastern Sea. After Long Tianying completed the funeral in grief, he cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao and said, "Young hero Fang, young Master Chu, I have already completed the task of sending Master Tam Yuan home. Next, I will return to the Eastern Sea. The two of you will take your leave." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Take care, President Long. In the future, if there is anything you need from me, Chu Xiu, please do not hesitate to ask. If I can help, I will absolutely not decline." Long Tianying was a person who valued friendship. This was something that Chu Xiu could see. Of course, Chu Xiu wanted to make friends with Long Tianying not only because he valued friendship, but also because Long Tianying had the ability which might be useful in the future. Although the Cetacean Society was far away in the overseas land, they still had to trade with the Central Plains. Not to mention their strength, but their financial strength was not weak. Long Tianying thanked Chu Xiu and directly left. He had a good impression of Chu Xiu. At least, Chu Xiu did not turn his back on him after obtaining the power of inheritance. He was not as unbearable as the rumors of Jianghu made him out to be. But even so, Long Tianying would only befriend Chu Xiu instead of helping Master Tam Yuan for free. Chu Xiu was only the successor of Master Tam Yuan's cultivation method, not Master Tam Yuan's disciple. Therefore, with the death of Master Tam Yuan, the kindness of the past naturally ended, and it was impossible for it to be passed on to Chu Xiu. After Long Tianying left, looking at Master Tam Yuan's grave in front of him, Fang Qishao suddenly sighed and said with a rare serious expression, "Brother Chu, what do you think people live for?" I felt that Master Tam Yuan was at a disadvantage. It's not a problem for an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm to live for more than 400 years. But now Master Tam Yuan is only 100 years old, and he's already buried. Is it worth it to exchange his 300 years of lifespan for the lives of those people? If he didn't die, he might be able to save more people. Chu Xiu looked ahead, narrowed his eyes and said, "Sometimes accounts can't be calculated like this. Only when you have a thought in your heart can you achieve something. 10,000 years is too long and some people would rather seize the day." For Master Tam Yuan, he didn't regret what he did in the past 100 years. It was worth it. If you ask people what they live for, everyone's answer is different. But if they die without regrets, then it's worth it. What about you? Have you thought clearly about what you live for in this life? Fang Qishao was stunned by Chu Xiu's question. He looked at the sword in his hand without blinking. The usually talkative Fang Qishao was actually silent for a long time. After a quarter of an hour, Fang Qishao faintly said, "What do I live for? I should be living for the sake of living. Do you feel that I talk a lot?" Chu Xiu didn't speak. Fang Qishao didn't talk a lot, but he talked a lot. But Fang Qishao didn't wait for Chu Xiu to answer and continued, "I talk a lot every day, even to the point that my senior brothers and junior brothers in Sword King City are impatient. That's because I'm afraid. I'm afraid that one day I'll die and I won't be able to talk so much. In fact, I was very miserable when I was young, so miserable that I almost didn't have the chance to talk. You know the Western regions. Big countries are at war, small countries are at war, and bandits are everywhere. When I was 5 years old, my village was slaughtered by bandits. I hid in a water jar and escaped everything. Later, the bandits left, but I still didn't dare to come out of the water jar. It wasn't until 3 days later when I couldn't stand the hunger anymore that I crawled out. But no one in the entire village could talk. That was the first time I was so close to death. Since then, I didn't like the darkness and silence. As long as I can bathe in the sunlight every day and live, I'm satisfied. Chu Xiu looked at Fang Qixiao with a surprised expression. If Fang Qixiao hadn't told him these secrets, only a few people in the pugilistic world would know that his background was so miserable. Similarly, Fang Qixiao's requirements were also so low. Most of the martial artists in the pugilistic world fought for fame and fortune. But ever since Chu Xiu met Fang Qixiao, he didn't care much about fame and fortune. But now, Chu Xiu knew that it wasn't that Fang Qixiao didn't care about fame and fortune, but that in his heart, nothing was more important than living. Only those who had experienced death knew the value of living. In the great terror between life and death, some things were not so important. When he said these things, Fang Qixiao's tone didn't contain any sadness, as if he was just narrating a simple story. After that, Fang Qixiao smiled at Chu Xiu and said, "Brother Chu, when you asked me these questions just now, I told you all my secrets. What about you? What are you living for in this life?" After thinking for a moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "If someone told you from the beginning that your fate was already predestined, would you accept it or resist it?" Fang Qixiao was stunned and said, "Are you kidding me? Nothing in this world is predestined from the beginning. If fate really can't be changed, then what's the point of studying the divination masters of Taoism and Buddhism? Anyway, I'm going to die, so I'll just follow fate. Even martial artists like us, if everything is really predestined, then what's the point of cultivating? Find a divination master to tell your fortune. If you don't have any achievements in the future, then no matter how much you cultivate, it'll be a waste of time." Chu Xiu said softly, "Yes, nothing in this world is predestined from the beginning. The saying that man can conquer nature is very cliché. Although no one says it out loud, everyone still does it. You asked me what I'm living for in this life. Even I can't explain it clearly. I just don't want to be imprisoned by fate. I just want to stand at the peak and see the scenery below." Fang Qixiao raised his eyebrows and said, "How high is the peak?" Chu Xiu stared at Fang Qixiao and said in a deep voice, very high, so high that no one can stand higher than me." Fang Qixiao also stared at Chu Xiu. He finally realized that he and Chu Xiu were really two different kinds of people. Chu Xiu's ambition was bigger than others could imagine. However, right at this moment, 7th young master Fang revealed a trace of a smile and broke the heavy atmosphere. He chuckled and said, "Brother Chu, the higher you stand, the more miserable your fall will be. You have to consider this carefully." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Falling from the peak is not scary. What's scary is that you don't even have the qualifications to stand at the peak and fall." Fang Qixiao shrugged his shoulders. Although he spoke more than Chu Xiu, it was a pity that he didn't know how to respond to Chu Xiu's words. "That's right, Brother Chu, after you bury Master Tam Yuan, are you preparing to return to the Guanzhong torture room?" Fang Qixiao changed the topic and asked. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "The Guanzhong torture room is fine for now. I've already come out, so I'm not in a rush to go back. I'm preparing to go to West Chu to see a friend before returning to the Guanzhong torture room." The plan to go to West Chu was something Chu Xiu had thought about on the way here. Simply put, he was going to West Chu for Lu Fengxian. But Chu Xiu was going to find Lu Fengxian, not just to catch up with Lu Fengxian, but rather to help Lu Fengxian obtain the ancient demon god Lu Wenho's inheritance. In the original plot, the place where Lu Fengxian obtained the inheritance was in West Chu, around this time period. Although there was Chu Xiu's interference and Lu Fengxian still returned to West Chu, whether or not he would come was still a variable. Therefore, Chu Xiu, who had just said that man could conquer nature, was now hoping that the future had not changed. Of course, it was not a big deal even if it changed. With the power that Chu Xiu had now in his previous life, Lu Fengxian could rely on herself to obtain Lu Wenho's inheritance. Now with Chu Xiu's help, the chances were much higher. Those famous characters in the future, they either climbed up step by step, or they obtained some kind of opportunity and directly soared into the sky, becoming a dragon. Lu Fengxian's opportunity to become a dragon was in Lu Wenho's inheritance. Of course, even if Lu Fengxian did not have this inheritance, his strength was not weak enough to compete with the disciples of those large sections. Only cultivation methods were an innate factor. The further one went, the greater the gap would be. If Lu Fengxian could obtain Lu Wenho's inheritance, then this gap would be completely closed. There were very few people who used halberd as a weapon in Jianghu, and those who could use halberd to its peak were even fewer. It could be said that Lu Wenho's inheritance was simply prepared for Lu Fengxian. Even if others obtained it, they would not be able to use it to its fullest potential. When Fang Qishao heard Chu Xiu say this, he suddenly smiled and said, "Brother Chu, how about I come with you? You can go to West Chu to see your friends, and I will also go to West Chu to see the High Hill Dong family's mountain opening ceremony and join in on the fun." Chu Xiu had a strange look in his eyes when he heard this. Lu Wenho's inheritance was found during the mountain opening ceremony. The so-called mountain opening ceremony was a tradition of the West Chu 10,000 mountains. Most of the West Chu lands were surrounded by wild forests, so some sects or families that lived in the mountains would organize people to cut down forests and open up a part of the forest. In the West Chu 10,000 Great Mountains, there was no telling what kind of danger they would encounter, fierce beasts or even some unexpected things. So every family would hold a ceremony before they started cutting the forest, commonly known as the mountain opening ceremony. It could be considered a special feature of West Chu. Chapter 477. The opening mountain ceremony was a tradition in West Chu. Basically, all the forces that were close to the 100,000 mountains would do this before they started cutting forests. In fact, it was just a ceremony for peace of mind. In fact, if one wanted to be safe, it was better to take some incense money and ask for a talisman formation from the Taoist Master Mansion in Longhu Mountain, or go to the Great Light Temple to ask for a magic weapon that had been blessed by the Buddha's light. However, this was a ceremony for those small forces, but for the Jialing Dong family, one of the 9 great families, the scale of the opening mountain ceremony was not ordinary, and the interval was very long. It had been over 10 years since the last time the Dong clan held the opening ceremony. During this period of time, the strength of the Dong clan hadn't changed much. Therefore, the Dong clan was preparing to cut down trees and take a gamble. The Dong family, one of the 9 great families, wanted to cut forests, and the scale was not ordinary. It was not something that those small forces could compare to. Moreover, the Dong family would also invite some martial artists who were on good terms to participate and explore a certain area in the 100,000 mountains together. This kind of behavior was similar to gambling. No one knew what was in the deep mountains and dense forests. If they were lucky, they could find some minerals that could bring some profits to the family, or they could find some precious elixirs that could increase the family's strength. The best case was if they found ancient ruins, then the family's power would definitely skyrocket. However, this was only when they were lucky. If they were unlucky, then there was no telling what they would encounter. It would be fine if they encountered evil beasts. For existences like the Jialing Dong family, they could deal with most of the evil beasts. Even if they could not deal with them, they could just look for reinforcements. This was not the ancient times when ferocious beasts were everywhere and ate people. Nowadays, ferocious beasts were like a moving treasure trove for martial artists. Every part of their bodies was a treasure. What was really difficult was something that one could not predict. For example, the Jialing Dong family had once mistakenly entered a huge ancient killing formation, causing the killing formation to activate. It killed half of the Jialing Dong family of that generation, and even the martial arts master did not manage to escape. Also, the Jialing Dong family had once brought a strange thing out of the 100,000 mountains. No one knew what it was, but the Jialing Dong family had to sacrifice hundreds of lives to get rid of it. Therefore, cutting down forests in the mountains was actually a gamble. Although it was said that one relied on the mountains to survive, the things in the mountains were not easy to deal with. In this generation, the Jialing Dong clan's strength was considered decent among the 9 great clans. Although they were not the top clans, they were at least in the middle. That was why the Dong clan had the intention to take the risk and conquer the mountains and forests. Now that they had found something good, their strength would increase greatly. Even if they encountered any trouble, the Highland Dong clan would be able to handle it with their current strength. However, according to what Chu Xiu knew this time, the Jialing Dong clan had indeed found something good, but they had also encountered a huge problem. Moreover, that good thing belonged to Lu Fengxian, not the Jialing Dong clan. Moreover, even if the Jialing Dong clan obtained LV Wenho's inheritance, it would be useless. The Jialing Dong clan's martial arts were completely different from LV Wenho's martial arts. Be it the demon god's unparalleled halberd or the 9 heavens fiend golden body, they could not cultivate either, unless the entire Dong clan gave up on their own martial arts and cultivated something else. Chu Xiu was also not interested in the demon god's unparalleled halberd. He had practiced his saber skills for too long. If he changed to another weapon, not only would it be awkward, the effort he put in would not be worth the rewards. However, Chu Xiu was very interested in the demon god's unparalleled halberd. This cultivation technique was originally evaluated to be above the 9 heavens fiend golden body. Because the only person who cultivated it was Lu Fengxian, some details were not clear, so the evaluation of the cultivation technique was based on the lowest. Even this kind of cultivation technique had as many as the 9 heavens fiend golden body. It was most likely to be a supreme cultivation technique or a peerless cultivation technique. In the battle with Zhongxian, Chu Xiu also felt that although his strength was strong, he was not the strongest existence in the same realm. In the past it was Chu Xiu who used his strength to crush others. However, when he encountered a martial artist like Zhongxian who specialized in physical strength, Chu Xiu was easily crushed by him. Although Chu Xiu didn't plan to walk the same path as Zhongxian, for the current Chu Xiu, it would be perfect to develop himself to the point where there were no shortcomings or loopholes. After deciding to go to West Chu, Fang Qishao also wanted to follow, and Chu Xiu did not stop him. One of the 9 great families, the Jialing Dong family, was going to hold the mountain opening ceremony. The Dong family invited countless people to come and watch the show, so Fang Qishao was not one of them. Chu Xiu planned to win in the chaos and did not plan to attack by force. However, after Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao left Peace Pine Mansion, Chu Xiu discovered that the news about him had once again spread in the martial world. It was not because he had obtained Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, but because Chu Xiu had stepped into the Longhu ranking's 5th place. Although Master Tam Yuan was a holy monk, he was not famous for his martial arts. Therefore, in the Central Plains, people only knew that Master Tam Yuan was virtuous and was a good person. They knew what Master Tam Yuan had done, so no one cared about Master Tam Yuan's true strength. However, the battle between Chu Xiu and Zhongxian was quite eye-catching. No one expected that Chu Xiu could fight Zhongxian to such an extent. Although the battle was interrupted by Master Tam Yuan, everyone could at least confirm that Chu Xiu had the strength to fight Zhongxian. However, no one knew how far the battle would go. However, based on the strength that Chu Xiu had displayed in that battle, Wind-Sweeping Tower had raised Chu Xiu's ranking by 1 place. He had squeezed out Ying Bailu of the Shangshuaying clan to become the 5th place on the Longhu ranking. In the Longhu ranking, the top 10 had always been a level and the top 5 had been another level. Although the Longhu ranking could not include all the young talents in the world, it at least represented that Chu Xiu was standing at the peak of the younger generation in the martial world. Of course, there were also many people in the martial world who complained about Ying Bailu. They believed that even if Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, even if he could fight Zhongxian for such a long time, he was definitely not as good as Ying Bailu. They believed that Wind-Sweeping Tower's ranking was unfair. Of course, most of the people who did this were women and young women at that. If one were to talk about who had the best luck with women in the martial world, it would definitely be Ying Bailu. He was strong, had an illustrious family background, was handsome and was well versed in music, chess, calligraphy and painting. Most importantly, Ying Bailu was not dissolute. There were rumors in the martial world that Ying Bailu was in love with the Cloud Sword Fairy of the Yunu Palace, Yan Fian. His infatuation had not changed even after so many years. How could such an outstanding and infatuated man not attract women? However, Wind-Sweeping Tower was one of the 6 sects, and the top 5 of the Longhu ranking were very serious. Of course, they would not listen to a group of women and change the ranking. They directly pretended that they did not hear anything. As for Chu Xiu, because he had squeezed out Ying Bailu's ranking, he had inexplicably made a bunch of enemies. The Shangshuaying clan did not say anything, but a lot of women in the martial world were very hostile towards him. At that moment, in a study room of the Shangshuaying clan, Ying Bailu held a brush in his hand and was sketching a beauty with his eyes closed. He did not open his eyes because he was showing off his perception, but because the beauty he wanted to draw was not in his eyes, but in his heart. At this moment, the door was pushed open and the martial grandmaster level servant of the Ying clan, Uncle Fu, walked in. Just as he was about to say something, Ying Bailu waved his hand lightly. Uncle Fu immediately understood what was going on and stood quietly to the side. Ying Bailu was leisurely sketching the figure under his brush. She was dressed in a rainbow-colored feather robe, dancing with a sword in her hand, like a fairy from the 9 heavens. Ying Bailu was drawing Yan Fian. After he was done, Ying Bailu looked at his drawing, but shook his head in dissatisfaction. He stretched out his hand and a faint golden energy burst out, directly crushing the drawing to dust. Ordinary paper and brush could not draw the fairy's face. Uncle Fu, did something happen? Or did that white tiger kid cause trouble again? Ying Bailu asked softly. Uncle Fu hurriedly said, "It's not about second young master. Eldest young master, have you heard about the rumors in the pugilistic world? Chu Xiu obtained holy monk Tan Yuan's inheritance and fought with Zhongxian of the Great Light Temple. This also caused wind-sweeping tower to move Chu Xiu's ranking on the Longhu leaderboard by 1 place, pushing you down. Ing Bailu nodded indifferently and said, I know. Uncle Fu was taken aback then said, Then eldest young master, are you prepared? Ing Bailu waved his hand casually and said, I'm not prepared. It's just a ranking on the Longhu leaderboard. Why should I care so much? I'm ranked 5th and I'm Ing Bailu. I'm ranked 1st and I'm still Ing Bailu. Will anyone in the pugilistic world look down on me just because I'm ranked 6th? Uncle Fu, you know me. I don't care about these rankings. If I did, I would have challenged Fang Qishao and Zhong Xian a long time ago. There's no need to mention these things anymore. Outsiders can say whatever they want. Uncle Fu nodded. The eldest young master's breadth of mind was indeed not something an ordinary person could compare to. These things might be a big deal to other young martial artists, but to Ing Bailu, it was really not a big deal. Just as Uncle Fu was about to leave, Ing Bailu suddenly said, Wait, Uncle Fu. There's something you need to tell father. I'm going to West Chu. Uncle Fu said in surprise, Eldest young master, why are you going to West Chu? Also, why don't you tell the patriarch yourself? Ing Bailu said indifferently, The High Hill Dong family is about to prepare for the mountain opening ceremony. Miss Yin will be representing the Yu Palace to attend the ceremony. Although the Dong family didn't invite me this time, I'm also going. Father doesn't like me being too close to Miss Yen. You should know this. If I tell him, it'll be hard to avoid an argument with father. I don't want to have these meaningless arguments, so you should tell father. Chapter 478. Everyone in the pugilistic world knew that Ing Bailu was in love with Yan Fian, but they didn't know if it was true or just a rumor. However, everyone in the Shangshuaying clan knew it was true. Because of this, Ing Bailu had even quarreled with his father several times. In fact, in terms of their family backgrounds, strength and so on, Yan Fian and Ing Bailu could be considered a match made in heaven. If Ing Bailu wanted to marry Yan Fian, the Ing clan of Shangshui would do everything in their power to play matchmaker. However, the problem was that Yan Fian was a disciple of the Yu Palace and the future successor of the Yu Palace. She was destined to become the palace master of the Yu Palace. The rule of the Yu Palace was that women were not allowed to marry outside, let alone the palace master. Even if the other party was Ing Bailu from the Shangshuaying clan, it was still the same. Therefore, in the Shangshuaying clan, whether it was Ing Bailu's father or the other elders, they all advised Ing Bailu to change his target. Even if Ing Bailu wanted to marry the moon-worshipping cult saintess, it would be easier than marrying Yan Fian. There was no need to waste time and energy on her. But who knew that Ing Bailu, who had always appeared to be very rational, would be extremely stubborn when it came to the matter of Yan Fian. No matter who tried to persuade him, it was useless. Even now, Ing Bailu had no intention of changing his mind. Uncle Fu hesitated. Young master, it really is impossible for you and Miss Yan. Even if the patriarch agrees, what will the Yu Palace say? Not to mention that Miss Yan has already rejected you several times. Ing Bailu didn't care and waved his hand. Everything will sort itself out. There will always be a solution. Uncle Fu, I'll be leaving first. I'll have to trouble you to inform my father. As soon as he finished speaking, Ing Bailu turned around and left without giving Uncle Fu a chance to speak. Looking at Ing Bailu's back, Uncle Fu shook his head. Perhaps there was nothing perfect in this world. The young master was good at everything, but he couldn't see through the word, love. It was fate's joke. At this time in the West Chu territory, Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao directly arrived at West Chu through a small path in the southwest. As for why he wanted to go to the southwest, it was purely because Chu Xiu wanted to see what the southwest had become. The result was just as Chu Xiu had expected. There were still some capable people under the second prince's command, and they managed the southwest in an orderly manner. As for what the martial arts sects in the southwest were thinking, Chu Xiu did not know. In any case, no matter how miserable they were, it was still better than being destroyed, wasn't it? After arriving at West Chu, Fang Qishao cupped his hands to Chu Xiu and said, Brother Chu will be leaving. You can go find your friend, I'll be going to the Jailing Dong family to eat. Seventh young master Fang really meant what he said when he said that he was going to make a living because the Jailing Dong family did not invite Sword King City. However, the Sword King City did not have any enmity with the Jailing Dong family. With the Sword King City's strength and Fang Qishao's identity, even if he did not receive an invitation, he would still receive preferential treatment from the Jailing Dong family. Chu Xiu smiled and said, It's fine, I believe we will meet soon. Fang Qishao was stunned. Chu Xiu was also going to the Jailing Dong family to participate in the opening ceremony? However, before he could ask more, Chu Xiu had already left. This made Fang Qishao shake his head, and after muttering a few words, he also turned around and left. Chu Xiu would go to the Jailing Dong family's opening ceremony, but before that he had to find Lu Fengxian. Speaking of the Jailing Dong family, Chu Xiu had come into contact with the second eldest of the Jiangdong five heroes, Dong Xiangyi. Although in theory, Dong Xiangyi was not killed by Chu Xiu, but by the internal strife of the Jiangdong five heroes, Chu Xiu could not escape from it. Chu Xiu only hoped that this time when he went to the Jailing Dong family, he would not get into trouble because of this matter. However, according to Chu Xiu's analysis, there should not be any trouble. Dong Xiangyi had left the Jailing Dong family because he had lost in the family power struggle, so he left in a huff. Now, there were probably only a few people in the Dong family who still remembered Dong Xiangyi, let alone trouble Chu Xiu because of him. At this time, Lu Fengxian should be with Feng Buping, the divine doctor of Jianghu in West Chu, Angry Yama. Feng Buping's medical center was in a valley in Danyang County of West Chu, and he was quite famous in Jianghu. Chu Xiu casually asked around and knew where he was going. It was Chu Xiu's first time coming to West Chu. Among the three countries in the world, Eastern Qi occupied the Central Plains, which was the most prosperous and rich. Although Northern Yin was close to the extreme cold in the north, it was not bad. Moreover, the people were fierce and martial arts were popular, which was enough to compete with Eastern Qi, and it would be like this in the future. As for West Chu, it was the weakest of the three countries, and it had the smallest population. Even most of West Chu's territory was covered by barren mountains and dense forests, and there were very few large-scale counties and prefectures. When he was in Eastern Qi and Northern Yin, Chu Xiu could just walk on the main road to get to a place quickly, but now that he was in West Chu, he had to go back and forth between small roads, which was very tiring. There were some places where there was not even a proper road. No wonder so many forces in West Chu had the habit of cutting down forests. For them, the surrounding forests were not only a resource, but also a hindrance. Perhaps only the Miao Borders moon-worshipping cult or Dragon Tiger Mountain's celestial master mansion would have the courage to establish a sect in the remote mountains and forests, not afraid of any fierce beasts. It should be said that even fierce beasts would have to hide from them. Feng Buping's medical center was in the Danyang County's Dead Man Valley. The name was very inauspicious, but in fact it was not a good place. It was said that this Dead Man Valley was the place where a small family used to live, but that family was massacred and the valley was filled with blood, so this place was called the Dead Man Valley. Later, the Dead Man Valley was shrouded in miasma all day long. Ordinary people and animals would have a hard time coming out. Even martial artists below Xiantian would have a hard time resisting this miasma, so this place was abandoned. But 10 years ago, when Feng Buping came here, he relied on his medical skills to plant all kinds of exotic flowers and rare herbs here. Not only did he make the miasma disappear, but he also made a name for himself, making the name of Angry Yama resound in Jianghu. When Chu Xiu arrived at the Dead Man Valley, this place was not desolate at all, but it was very lively. Most of the martial artists coming and going were here to find Feng Buping for treatment, and there were also some who were simply here to buy medicine. Before Chu Xiu could enter the valley, a short and thin martial artist squeezed his way over and smiled as he cupped his hands and said, "This young master is also here to find Divine Dr. Feng for treatment?" However, Divine Dr. Feng's reputation in the world of martial arts is very big. These people are all here to find him for treatment, and the longest queue is already a year later. However, this little one has been staying outside the Dead Man Valley for several years, and I am familiar with Divine Dr. Feng's character. If this young master can take out a little money, I will tell you Divine Dr. Feng's preferences, and guarantee that the consultation fee you take out will be recognized by Divine Dr. Feng. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Guarantee that I will get treatment immediately?" The martial artist immediately shook his head and said, "Of course not, you still have to queue up, but if the thing you take out is not to Divine Dr. Feng's liking, then you don't even have the qualifications to queue up." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. This Feng Buping is really popular to this point, even queuing up depends on his mood. Thinking so, Chu Xiu ignored the martial artist and directly entered the Dead Man Valley. Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, the martial artist couldn't help but sneer. "So it turns out to be a poor ghost. Wait until you eat a loss, then you will regret it." There are many people outside the Dead Man Valley, but there are even more people inside, and most of them are seriously injured to a certain extent. Feng Buping's price is not low, and the conditions are harsh, so as long as there is a little hope, most of the martial artists will not come to find him. At the end of the Dead Man Valley are several thatched huts, surrounded by all kinds of strange flowers and plants. One of them is a thin middle-aged man, only at the Five Cheese origin realm, with 2 strokes of mustache, dressed in a sloppy manner, sitting in front of the thatched hut. When someone comes, he will carefully examine the other party. Those who need to do something will do it, those who need to take medicine he will directly prescribe a few doses of medicine, and then throw it to the side of the errand boy for them to deal with. Although his attitude is not good, his actions are very swift. This person is the angry Yama Feng Buping, known as the divine doctor who can snatch people from the hands of the Yama King. Feng Buping's strength is not strong, and Chu Xiu knows that for Feng Buping, he doesn't need much strength in his line of work. At least, he needs to use strength in places where it is less than the refiners. Of course, don't look at Feng Buping's weak strength, his status is there. Among the martial artists who come to treat, there are some from some big sects or some who are at the unity of the heaven and man realm, but they are still reprimanded by Feng Buping like a grandson, not even daring to refute. Just as Chu Xiu wants to directly walk in front of Feng Buping, some martial artists look at Chu Xiu with a somewhat unfriendly gaze. They have been queuing here for a long time, and some even live outside the Dead Man Valley, waiting for their turn according to the order. In the end, this kid actually wants to cut the line. This is breaking the rules. Therefore, a temperamental martial artist who is at the unity of the heaven and man realm couldn't help but stand up and say, "Hey kid, do you know what the rules are?" Chu Xiu glanced at him, and the aura of the unity of the heaven and man realm slowly bloomed out. It gradually rose, getting stronger and stronger. Finally, the demonic aura and murderous aura seemed to condense into a substance, abnormally terrifying. The martial artist who is at the unity of the heaven and man realm swallowed a mouthful of saliva, turned around and went back to his position. He didn't even dare to let out a fart. Putting aside the horrifying aura, although he didn't know Chu Xiu, such a young unity of the heaven and man realm martial artist, needless to say, the background of such a background must be shocking. Finding trouble with such a person is simply courting death. Chapter 479. Chu Xiu walked straight towards Feng Buping. This caused Feng Buping to frown, then he coldly snorted and said, "Brat, no matter which sect you come from, since you're here, you must abide by my rules. If you want to cure me, then take out a satisfactory consultation fee and then scram to the back of the queue." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Dr. Feng, don't be so agitated. Do I look like I'm sick? I'm here to look for someone." Feng Buping glanced at Chu Xiu. With just one glance, Chu Xiu felt as if his entire body was being seen through. This was a very strange feeling. There was no danger at all. Therefore, Chu Xiu didn't even subconsciously resist. When Chu Xiu wanted to mobilize the qi in his body, the feeling disappeared in an instant. Feng Buping nodded and said, "That's right, your qi and blood are strong and your qi is deep. You're as strong as a flood dragon. There's nothing wrong with you. Who are you looking for?" At this time Lu Fengxian came out from the back and saw Chu Xiu. He was pleasantly surprised and said, "Brother Chu, why are you here?" Feng Buping looked at Chu Xiu in surprise and said, "You're Chu Xiu?" Feng Buping and Lu Fengxian were close friends. Naturally, he knew about Chu Xiu's existence. Among the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger list, there weren't many martial artists who came from the bottom. For Chu Xiu to be ranked 5th, this was already a legend. Chu Xiu cupped his hands towards Feng Buping and said, "Yes, I came to pay a visit. I hope Dr. Feng doesn't take offense." After saying that, Chu Xiu turned to Lu Fengxian and said, "Of course there's a good thing that I'm looking for you. Moreover, it's a very good thing." Feng Buping knew that the two of them might have something to say, so he waved his hand and said, "You two go inside and talk. I'm very busy here, don't worry about me." Following Lu Fengxian to the back room, Lu Fengxian smiled and said, "Brother Chu, what good news do you have for me? Could it be that Brother Chu has become the successor of the Guanzhong torture room and is looking for me to be the torturer?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "You rejected Qin Qingdi's offer to take you into the World Alliance. How could you fancy the Guanzhong torture room? I came to find you because I'm prepared to seize an opportunity together. There's a cultivation technique inside that is very suitable for you. It should be said that it was prepared for you." Lu Fengxian asked directly, "When?" Lu Fengxian was a trusting person, but he wasn't a fool. Even if he trusted someone, there was a degree of trust. If it was someone else, Lu Fengxian wouldn't refuse. However, he would ask in detail what the opportunity was, how dangerous it was, how the other party knew about it, and so on. But facing Chu Xiu, Lu Fengxian knew that Chu Xiu wouldn't harm him, so he only needed time to prepare. And because Chu Xiu knew Lu Fengxian's character, he didn't make up any excuses, because he knew that Lu Fengxian wouldn't ask too many questions. There's still time. 1 month later, the Jialing Dong family's mountain opening ceremony will be held. We can enter with the Dong family. By the way, Brother Lu, how are your injuries? LV Fengxian stretched her body and said, Divine Physician Feng's miraculous hands can bring me back to life. My injuries can only be healed with time if placed elsewhere, but in Divine Physician Feng's hands, I have fully recovered in a month. Chu Xiu felt strange and asked, Then why are you still here? LV Fengxian shook her head and said, I am only here to protect Divine Dr. Feng. Divine Dr. Feng has not been very peaceful during this period of time. I am here to help him block some thieves. Chu Xiu felt strange and asked, There are still people looking for trouble with Feng Buping? Generally, in the pugilistic world, people like Feng Buping who could save your life, divination masters, refiners and the like, although they were weak, very few people would look for trouble with them because it wasn't worth it. As cultivators, these kinds of people posed no threat to them. Moreover, they might have a use for them in the future. Therefore, even the disciples of the big sects had to be polite to these kinds of people. Not to mention looking for trouble, they didn't even have time to curry favor with them. Lu Fengxian smiled bitterly. If it was someone else, it would naturally be the same, but you have seen Divine Dr. Feng's character. Even if he is treating an illness and saving a life, his attitude is still the same and he would often offend people. This also caused many people to dislike Divine Dr. Feng. Their injuries have been healed, but in their hearts, they do not feel the slightest bit of gratitude towards Divine Dr. Feng. Instead they hate him. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He could also see that a doctor who could shout at people to get lost naturally had a bad temper. Of course, this could only be attributed to nature. Mo Yezi's temper was also quite strange. But at least he didn't offend people. Instead, he made a lot of connections. Even if he offended the Luo clan, he wasn't afraid. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion outside. This made Lu Fengxian frown and sigh, It's here again. Chu Xiu was confused. Who? Lu Fengxian said helplessly, Someone looking for trouble. You can't handle it? Chu Xiu knew Lu Fengxian's strength. Although Lu Fengxian was only at the Five Qis unification realm, with his strength he could fight against most of the one with heaven and man martial artists. Could it be that the person looking for trouble was a martial Dao grandmaster? Lu Fengxian shook her head and said, I can handle it, but that guy's background is a little big. Someone from the top forces in the pugilistic world? Chu Xiu asked. Not a top force, but his master is a martial Dao grandmaster who cultivates alone. He's the youngest disciple. Hearing Lu Fengxian's words, Chu Xiu immediately understood where the problem was. If the other party was a disciple of a top force, then it could be solved through various connections or other methods. But the disciple of a martial Dao grandmaster who cultivates alone was very tricky, because such people usually meant that their master must be a very protective existence. Lu Fengxian sighed and said, Even if it's tricky, I have to take care of it. Dr. Feng saved me twice, I can't abandon him. After saying that, Lu Fengxian directly walked out of the door, and Chu Xiu also followed behind her. At this time, outside the door, the herbs that Feng Buping specially planted around him had been trampled and destroyed. Feng Buping's face was gloomy, and he was trembling with anger. A martial artist in his 30s with physical invulnerability cultivation, wearing brocade clothes, looked at Feng Buping and sneered, Bullshit Dr. Feng, I think you're a Jianghu swindler. In the beginning, I spent so much money to let you help me sort out the chaotic true qi in my body. You said that you could guarantee that I would be safe and sound and recover to my peak, but in the end, I still have a hidden injury. Feng Buping, if you don't give me an explanation for this matter, I'll come and smash your Dead Man Valley every few days, and make your medical center completely shut down. Feng Buping said with a gloomy face, What did I tell you at the beginning? After sorting out the true qi, you can't get close to women for a month. It's you who can't control the thing in your crotch and now you're blaming me? At that time, I was also blind and coveted the purple gold mysterious ginseng that your master gave me. That's why I spent a whole 2 days to help you sort out your true qi. I didn't expect that you would bite the hand that fed you. Well, I don't want that purple gold mysterious ginseng anymore, get out of here. The martial artist sneered and said, You don't want it? Then what about my hidden injury? If I don't cure my hidden injury, this matter won't end. Feng Buping roared angrily, At that time I said that if you break the precepts to get close to women after sorting out your true qi, you'll have to bear the consequences. Now that your true qi has completely torn apart a part of your dantian, even the gods can't save you. How do you want me to cure it? The martial artist said lightly, if you can't cure it then use something to compensate. Aren't you known as the divine doctor of Jianghu, Feng Buping? Take out your medical book, I'll let others study how to use it to treat myself. As soon as these words came out, Feng Buping's expression suddenly became extremely unsightly. The others also suddenly realized that the martial artist's goal was actually the medical book in Feng Buping's hands. The medical book in the hands of a divine doctor of Jianghu was definitely very valuable. Moreover, this thing was equivalent to a martial artist's martial arts secret book for a martial artist. How could it be casually handed over? This martial artist was simply trying to take it by force and trickery. Among the people of the Dead Man Valley, some people wanted to stand out. After all, this martial artist was causing trouble here, and it was also delaying their time. However, before they could make a move, they were immediately held down by others, who gave them a detailed explanation of this person's identity. This person was a West Chu rogue cultivator expert, Floating Blood Blade, Qiao Liandong's disciple, Zhou Bai. Qiao Liandong was famous in the West Chu land for being protective. In the early years he even went to the Celestial Master Mansion to seek justice because of his disciples' grievances with the Celestial Master Mansion. If the people present wanted to stand out, they wouldn't have to face Zhou Bai, but the protective martial arts grandmaster Qiao Liandong. Zhou Bai looked at Feng Buping calmly as if he had already eaten him. He knew that there weren't many people in West Chu who would help Feng Buping. This person's temper was too bad. Sometimes, even if he helped people cure their injuries, most people wouldn't appreciate his favor. Some rogue cultivators who wanted to help didn't dare to make a move after knowing his identity. Some disciples of the big sects didn't want to offend Qiao Liandong for Feng Buping after knowing his identity. After all, Qiao Liandong was considered a top figure in West Chu. Feng Buping was just a divine doctor, he wasn't the only divine doctor in the entire world. It wasn't worth offending a martial arts grandmaster for him. At this moment Lu Fengxian walked out and said in a cold voice, Zhou Bai, you've gone too far. If it wasn't for divine Dr. Feng, not to mention internal injuries, you would already be a cripple. Divine Dr. Feng doesn't even want the purple gold profound ginseng, what else do you want? Zhou Bai sneered, little Marquis Lu Fengxian? You're currently in the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger ranking. You're quite famous and your future is limitless. I advise you not to get involved in this matter, otherwise you won't want to know the consequences. Lu Fengxian knew how to repay kindness and always stayed by Feng Buping's side. Zhou Bai knew this but he wasn't afraid. Lu Fengxian was a rogue cultivator and didn't have any background. Moreover, she was chased out of northern Yen after offending the righteous manner, so there was nothing to worry about. Chapter 480. Zhou Bai's threat made Lu Fengxian very angry. Although Lu Fengxian usually appeared to be very kind, in fact, Lu Fengxian was also not a kind person. In the past, when they were being chased by the memorial hall, Lu Fengxian had killed the most people. Even if it was usually to solve a problem, although Lu Fengxian would reason with people most of the time, if reason didn't work, then it was time to use his halberd. But this time reason was obviously useless. Moreover, Zhou Bai's identity also forced Lu Fengxian not to make a move. If Lu Fengxian was alone, then he would have already split Zhou Bai in half. But now Feng Buping was still here. If he killed Zhou Bai, then the one who would be implicated would be Feng Buping. Therefore he couldn't make a move on his own. This kind of matter made Lu Fengxian feel very conflicted. Zhou Bai looked at Lu Fengxian calmly. He knew that Lu Fengxian wouldn't dare to make a move. Therefore Zhou Bai directly sneered and said, Lu Fengxian, I respect you as a young talent on the Longhu list. I don't want to be your enemy, but you'd better not meddle in my affairs. If you should meddle, do it. If you shouldn't meddle, then don't meddle. At this moment, Chu Xiu glanced at Feng Buping. Suddenly his heart moved. He directly stood up and said coldly, a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm actually has such a big tone. He simply doesn't know his place. Just because your master is a martial arts grandmaster, you can be so arrogant. Didn't your master teach you how to respect your superiors? Zhou Bai's face suddenly sank. He said coldly, who are you? Chu Xiu. As Chu Xiu said these two words lightly, the people present suddenly burst into an uproar. They had never seen Chu Xiu, but they definitely knew Chu Xiu's name. Last time, when Chu Xiu fought against Zhong Xian, his rank on the Dragon and Tiger rank had risen to the 5th place. This matter had spread through the entire world of martial arts with the change in Wind Sweeping Tower's ranking board, and Chu Xiu's name was once again known by the people. The top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard and the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard were worlds apart. Most importantly, Chu Xiu was different from Lu Fengxian. Lu Fengxian was alone, but Chu Xiu had the Guanzhong torture room behind him. Everyone who knew the inside story knew that although the Guanzhong torture room was very low-key, its strength was not inferior to a peak power. Its hall master, Guan Xiu, was famous in the world of martial arts. Even the Xiahou family's master had suffered under Guan Xiu's hands. Zhou Bai was also surprised why Chu Xiu was here, but he seemed to have heard that Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu were good friends. However, Zhou Bai didn't care. So what if it was Chu Xiu? This was West Chu, not the Guanzhong torture room. Zhou Bai directly said in a cold voice, the Guanzhong torture room's official Chu. You can show off in the Guanzhong torture room, but in my West Chu, you don't have the qualifications to do so. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, I'm not using the identity of the Guanzhong torture room to show off, I just want to tell you one thing. When the weak faces the strong, you must first learn respect. A fox can borrow the tiger's power, a dog can rely on its master's power, but the prerequisite is that there is a tiger behind you and your master by your side. Otherwise, that is seeking death. As soon as his voice fell, a chill suddenly rose from the bottom of Zhou Bai's heart. Before Zhou Bai could do anything, a profound aura erupted from Chu Xiu's body. Chu Xiu's eyes became like 2 deep pools, and powerful spiritual energy immediately pierced into Zhou Bai's mind, taking complete control of his body. This feeling was incomparably terrifying. He clearly had his own consciousness, but his body didn't listen to his orders. It was like his soul had become an outsider. In the back, Lu Fengxian and Feng Buping's expressions changed. Feng Buping didn't know Chu Xiu's personality and Lu Fengxian didn't think Chu Xiu would make a move this suddenly. Lu Fengxian wanted to say something, but Chu Xiu had already made his move. She saw Zhou Bai's hand explode with astral energy and hit his own dantian, completely crippling his martial arts. After that, he punched his fists against each other, causing both his arms to shatter and twist. His blood splattered all over the ground. White bones could be seen from Zhou Bai's elbow. He maintained a posture of self-mutilation, looking incomparably resolute. However, his eyes were filled with pain and horror. This kind of feeling was extremely evil and even more so, caused everyone present to shiver even though it wasn't cold. If Chu Xiu had directly crippled Zhou Bai, it would have been fine. But now, Chu Xiu had directly sent a glance at him, and Zhou Bai had actually directly mutilated himself. This kind of feeling was indeed a little too frightening. After Chu Xiu withdrew the soul-shifting technique, Zhou Bai knelt on the ground and let out a mournful howl. It was incomparably terrifying. If Divine Dr. Feng hadn't been there, your cultivation would have been crippled. Now that you know how to be grateful, I will cripple your cultivation. It's fair and reasonable, Chu Xiu said lightly. Zhou Bai's gaze towards Chu Xiu was filled with hatred. He didn't say anything and directly turned around to escape. He didn't even dare to say a word. Since Chu Xiu dared to cripple him, naturally he also dared to kill him. Lu Fengxian sighed behind him and said, Brother Chu, this is troublesome. Crippling Zhou Bai is fine, but his master Qiao Liandong will definitely come to the Dead Man Valley to cause trouble. I'm afraid that Divine Dr. Feng won't be able to stay here any longer. Chu Xiu didn't say anything. In fact, he deliberately crippled Zhou Bai and also deliberately lured Qiao Liandong here. He had no enmity with Feng Buping, so he wouldn't deliberately frame him. Chu Xiu just wanted to bring Feng Buping to the Guanzhong torture room. To be more precise, it should be the Guanxi region. With Feng Buping's character, Chu Xiu also didn't intend to make Feng Buping loyal to him and become his subordinate. However, as long as Feng Buping came to the Guanxi region for Chu Xiu, it would be enough to greatly increase his power. Therefore, when Chu Xiu heard this, he directly said, Brother Lu, Divine Dr. Feng, you guys have too many concerns in the past. That's why you can let this kind of villain cause trouble again and again. For these kinds of scoundrels, you can only be more ruthless and evil than them to be able to control them. Otherwise, the one who will suffer will always be you. Divine Dr. Feng doesn't need to worry. If you can't stay in West Chu's Dead Man Valley, the world is so big there are other places to go. My Guanzhong Punishment Hall is located between the 3 countries and there are many martial artists from the 3 countries coming and going. If Divine Dr. Feng is willing to come over, I won't let you suffer in other places. At least in the Guanxi region, I won't let you suffer. Feng Buping's face was gloomy. He sighed and said, With my character, no matter where I go, I can't avoid offending others. Zhou Bai has repeatedly found trouble with me. I'm afraid that he has already set his eyes on me. This is partly due to his master Qiao Liandong's instructions. If you want to go to the Guanzhong torture room, then go to the Guanzhong torture room. At least you can find a safe place. Actually, even if Chu Xiu didn't do this, Feng Buping still had thoughts of avoiding him. Zhou Bai stirring up trouble every other day had long since made Feng Buping impatient. It was just that Feng Buping was a bit reluctant to part with the various elixirs he had planted in the Dead Man Valley. Now that Chu Xiu had crippled Zhou Bai, he had thoroughly offended Qiao Liandong. This helped him make up his mind to change places. The Guanzhong torture room was not a bad choice. His character was eccentric and he loved to offend people. If he went to the Guanxi region, although he didn't have any friendship with Chu Xiu, Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu had a friendship. He believed that he would be able to live a more stable life in the Guanxi region. This divine Dr. Feng was actually a kind person. He didn't think about the dark side of Chu Xiu's actions. He thought that Chu Xiu was standing up for him. Feng Buping sighed and cupped his hands towards the other people present and said, "Everyone, I'm afraid that I can't treat everyone anymore. If there's anyone who wants to continue looking for me for treatment, please come to the Guanzhong region." It could be said that this was one of the rare times that Feng Buping spoke to people in a friendly manner. However, the people present were somewhat dissatisfied. They had queued up with great difficulty until now. In the end, they actually had to go to the Guanzhong region to queue up again. This made the people present secretly curse Zhou Bai and his disciple. It was their greed that forced divine Dr. Feng to leave. In such a big Dead Man Valley, there were many things that belonged to Feng Buping. They were the elixirs that he had planted here. Some of them that couldn't be transplanted were probably left here. As for those that could be taken away, they were picked by Feng Buping's servants. Chu Xiu handed over the Guanxi punishment officer's token to Feng Buping and said, "Divine Dr. Feng, take this token. As long as you go to the Guanxi region, give it to any of the Guanxi branch's constables. They will open the door for you. As for where you want to practice medicine, it all depends on your mood." Feng Buping received the token and nodded to Chu Xiu with a rare polite attitude and said, "Many thanks, official Chu." After all, in Feng Buping's view, Chu Xiu crippled Zhou Bai to stand up for him. Now that he was willing to give him the token and let him develop in the Guanzhong torture room, he was also helping him. Although Feng Buping's character wasn't good, he still knew that. Just when Feng Buping had finished packing up and was about to leave, a cold and angry voice suddenly came from the entrance of the Dead Man Valley. "You want to leave after crippling my disciple? I'm afraid you're thinking too much." At the entrance of the Dead Man Valley, a middle-aged martial artist wearing a blood-red robe stood there. He was holding a slender miaodao in his hand. The blade was dyed red with blood, making it look a bit evil. Seeing this person, some of the martial artists that hadn't left yet were shocked. Zhou Bai's master, floating blood blade, Qiao Liandong, he really came. Moreover, it had only been less than half an hour since Zhou Bai had left. The speed was a bit too fast. It was obvious that Qiao Liandong was in the vicinity. It was just that he had not directly interfered in this matter. Those that hadn't left were looking at Chu Xiu and the others with the mentality of watching a show. They were very curious about what Chu Xiu and the others would choose. They definitely wouldn't be able to win if they fought head-on. This was a martial arts master, and even in the West Chu land, Qiao Liandong was a famous expert. Chapter 481. Qiao Liandong looked angrily at Chu Xiu. He couldn't believe that this group of people actually dared to cripple his disciple. Actually, it wasn't Zhou Bai's idea to steal Feng Buping's medical manual. It was his idea and Zhou Bai didn't have the guts to do so. When he brought Zhou Bai for treatment, he hoped that Feng Buping would give him some face and reduce the consultation fee. Moreover, he didn't need to queue up. Unexpectedly, Feng Buping really didn't take him seriously, a martial Dao Grand Master. Not only did he not give him a single cent of the consultation fee, but he also forced him to take out the purple gold mysterious ginseng, which he regarded as a treasure, and even queued for a full month to cure Zhou Bai's injury. Although Qiao Liandong was a martial arts master, he wasn't a magnanimous person. From then on he bore a grudge against Feng Buping. However, he was still a famous person in West Chu's Jianghu. Directly stealing Feng Buping's medical manual was a bit too degrading. Therefore he was prepared to let his disciple Zhou Bai make a move and force Feng Buping to hand over the medical manual. However, he didn't think that this group of people would actually not put him in their eyes and cripple him just like that. Facing a martial arts master, although Feng Buping didn't show any fear on his face, his expression didn't look good either. After all, a doctor was just a doctor. When a martial arts master asked him for help, he was a divine doctor. But when someone wanted to kill him, he was nothing. As for Lu Fengxian, she gripped halberd tightly in her hand and was about to step forward. It wasn't like he hadn't faced a martial arts master before. Even when he was being chased by the morgue, he didn't retreat even half a step. However, just as Lu Fengxian was about to make a move, Chu Xiu already took a step forward and said indifferently, "Senior Qiao, you are a famous martial arts master in West Chu. Now you are letting your disciple rob you. Is this really good? Or could it be that the person who covets divine Dr. Feng's medical manual is you?" Qiao Liandong said coldly, "I'll be the one to discipline my own disciple. It's not up to you to make a move. Chu Xiu, you are the torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room, but this is West Chu. Even if you have Guan Siyu behind you, you crippled my disciple today. If I let you leave so easily, where would I put my face? You didn't kill my disciple, so I won't kill you today. I'll turn you into the same way you turned my disciple into. I want to see if Feng Buping can cure such a serious injury." For a rogue cultivator like Qiao Liandong, he was not afraid of the Guanzhong torture room. He was an unaffiliated martial artist with no fixed abode. So what if he offended the Guanzhong torture room? The only person who could threaten him in the Guanzhong torture room was Guan Siyu. Could it be that Guan Siyu would ignore the Guanzhong torture room and hunt him down in the pugilistic world? Moreover, Qiao Liandong was a martial arts grandmaster in West Chu. He was a rogue cultivator, so he didn't know many secrets. The Guanzhong torture room was low-key, but he really thought that the Guanzhong torture room wasn't strong and that Guan Siyu's strength wasn't that high. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and said, "Alright, I also want to experience Senior Qiao's strength. It's not like I haven't fought with a martial arts grandmaster before." Hearing this, the crowd was in an uproar. This Chu Xiu really dared to make a move. Did he really think that he was the little celestial master, Zhang Qingzhen? The pugilistic world was saying that the top 5 talents on the Longhu leaderboard had strength comparable to a martial arts grandmaster, but it was just a rumor. The only one who had the battle record of fighting a martial arts grandmaster was Zhang Qingzhen. Now that Chu Xiu had just stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, he dared to challenge Qiao Liandong, a veteran martial arts grandmaster. He was probably overestimating himself. There was also a hint of anger in Qiao Liandong's eyes. He had been famous for a long time, but no one had dared to ignore him like this. Just as Qiao Liandong raised the blood-colored Miao Dao in his hand, Chu Xiu had already moved. However, it was not his body that moved, but his spirit. In an instant, the soul-extinguishing technique and the mental demon rotation technique were performed to the extreme by Chu Xiu, and his mental strength was also raised to the highest level. With the support of the powerful mental strength, Chu Xiu also performed the heaven's sun gazing at air technique to the extreme. At this moment, Chu Xiu's entire body seemed to have merged with heaven and earth. His eyes were simply impossible to look directly at. Even the others who looked at Chu Xiu had an evil feeling of being stripped naked. Qiao Liandong, who bore the brunt of the attack, was even more so. He could not understand what was going on with Chu Xiu's body, but he had a feeling that the world was under Chu Xiu's control. Martial arts grandmaster was just an honorific title in the outside world. In fact, the realm of martial Dao grandmaster should be called the martial Dao true pellet realm. It mobilized the power of heaven and earth to refine the martial Dao true pellet in the Dantian and communicate with the power of heaven and earth. After swallowing a golden elixir, one would know that one's fate was not up to the heavens. Martial Dao true pellet was called Niden in Dao sects, and Buddhism also called it Saraira. Only Buddhist masters at the martial Dao grandmaster level could condense all the power of their body into martial Dao true pellet and turn it into a Saraira. Therefore, in the martial Dao level, only when one reached the martial Dao true pellet realm could they really borrow the power of heaven and earth with the martial Dao true pellet, and a casual blow would have the power to change the weather. Simply put, compared with the martial artists at the unity of heaven and man realm, the martial Dao true pellet realm grandmasters were closer to heaven and earth. But now facing Chu Xiu, the evil feeling made Qiao Liandong think that he was the one at the unity of heaven and man, and Chu Xiu was the martial Dao grandmaster. Everything was controlled by the other party, and that feeling was abnormally awkward. Qiao Liandong let out a cold snort and raised the saber in his hand. However, Chu Xiu took a step forward. This seemingly simple step locked onto Qiao Liandong's qi activity, as if all his subsequent actions had been seen through to the point where he could clearly see through them. Qiao Liandong changed his movement again and Chu Xiu took another step, and the result was exactly the same. Twice in a row, this made Qiao Liandong's gaze on Chu Xiu have changed a little. He is indeed a hero who can be ranked 5th on the Longhu list when he was born. Can this Chu Xiu really fight against a martial Dao grandmaster? Under Chu Xiu's magical heaven's sun gazing at air, Xiao Liandong couldn't help but have the intention to retreat. In the past, Xiao Liandong became famous not because of his martial arts, but because he once went to the celestial master mansion of Longhu Mountain to seek justice for his disciple, and he successfully went down the mountain. This made his reputation known to the people in Jianghu, and they all said that Xiao Liandong was tough enough to break into the celestial master mansion for his disciple. In fact, only Xiao Liandong knew the truth of this matter. At that time he did not have such courage. He just went to Longhu Mountain in a moment of anger, but when he was halfway up, he already regretted it. However, he had already gone up the mountain, and it would be even more embarrassing to go down now. So Xiao Liandong planned to go up the mountain after saying a few words, but he did not expect that the person who received him was not the martial Dao Grandmaster of Longhu Mountain, but the little celestial master, Zhang Qingzhen. Seeing that the other party did not even send a martial Dao Grandmaster, Xiao Liandong was really a little angry, but as he fought with Zhang Qingzhen for a few moves, he realized that Longhu Mountain sent Zhang Qingzhen to negotiate with him because they were giving him face. Moreover, Zhang Qingzhen did not publicize this matter after the incident. Instead, he politely sent him down the mountain. Therefore, outsiders thought that he had successfully gone to the Celestial Master Mansion to seek justice. Although in fact he had not, he had gained fame because of this. This was the first time Xiao Liandong knew what a real genius was, and what a real hero was. He even felt that he had lived for so long in vain. Not only was Zhang Qingzhen's strength extremely strong, but even the way he conducted himself made Xiao Liandong feel ashamed. It was not difficult to defeat one's enemy, but it was difficult to make one's enemy admire one's strength. At this time, facing Chu Xiu, Xiao Liandong was also a little surprised. Although he would not compare Chu Xiu with Zhang Qingzhen, he could not guarantee that Chu Xiu would be much weaker than Zhang Qingzhen. After all, Wind Sweeping Tower said that Chu Xiu had once fought with Zhong Xian. Although there was no ending, both sides were evenly matched before the armistice. It was widely recognized that among the younger generation, only Zhong Xian could compete with Zhang Qingzhen, so it was really hard to say the strength of Chu Xiu. Holding the saber, Xiao Liandong's eyes flashed with hesitation. He changed the saber momentum several times, but he did not slash out. Because he was not sure. This was not Dragon Tiger Mountain, but the Valley of the Dead with hundreds of people watching. If his saber slash did not do anything to Chu Xiu, even if it was a tie, he would lose all his face. Because he was a martial arts master and Chu Xiu was a junior martial artist. It was because Xiao Liandong was a rogue martial artist that he wanted his reputation. This saber was betting on his reputation. Should he make a move or not? After a while, Xiao Liandong put down the blood-colored Miao Dao in his hand and said coldly, "Chu Xiu, I will not cripple you since we are both from the countryside and it is not easy for you to get to where you are now. Plus, I am giving face to the Guanzhong torture room today. But my disciple has been crippled. This matter is not that easy to resolve. I'll give you 3 days to scram out of West Chu. If I see you again you won't have such good luck. My breadth of mind is limited." After saying that, Xiao Liandong turned around and left, leaving behind the stunned crowd. Xiao Liandong did not make a move and just left like this? His disciple's enmity was over like this? The West Chu martial artists knew Xiao Liandong's temperament very well. This fellow's breadth of mind was not big, otherwise he would not have repaid kindness with enmity and threatened phone booping. But now Xiao Liandong had become so magnanimous. What was this situation? Chapter 482. After Xiao Liandong left, Chu Xiu finally retracted his heaven's sun gazing at air state. At the same time his face was a little pale. The heaven's sun gazing at air did not consume true qi, but mental energy and mind. After all, Chu Xiu was not a martial Dao Grand Master. If he wanted to completely see through a martial Dao Grand Master, the price he had to pay was not ordinary. However, in the end Chu Xiu still succeeded. Xiao Liandong was scared away by him. To be precise, he should be tricked away. In fact, if Xiao Liandong was a little more courageous and directly attacked Chu Xiu, after all he was a martial Dao Grand Master, and the outcome was still uncertain. The heaven's sun gazing at air was not invincible. Just like when Chu Xiu faced Zhong Xian he could see the flaws in Zhong Xian's body, but in reality he could not defeat Zhong Xian with those flaws. Speaking of which, Chu Xiu had to thank Zhang Qingzhen, whom he had never met. It was because of Zhang Qingzhen's previous record that Xiao Liandong was so afraid of Chu Xiu. At this time, Lu Fengxian also noticed that something was wrong with Chu Xiu. He walked over and asked, "Brother Chu, are you okay?" Before Chu Xiu could say anything, Feng Buping said, "Official Chu is fine. He just consumed a little too much mental energy and mind. He will be fine after a period of recuperation." At this point, Feng Buping also looked at Chu Xiu with a strange gaze. "Official Chu, the cultivation method you cultivate is really magical. It can actually see through all the qi of the opponent. If it is used in a fight, the power of this cultivation method is quite shocking." Chu Xiu rubbed his head and said, "There is no cultivation method in this world that is perfect. To be able to see through the opponent's qi, you have to seize the opportunity. Divine Dr. Feng, your cultivation method is not weak. It can also see through the mystery of the human body. It is very magical." As a divine doctor in the pugilistic world, Feng Buping had his own abilities. He could see the miraculousness of the heaven's sun gazing at air technique at a glance. Moreover, when he had looked at Chu Xiu previously, he had also seen through Chu Xiu's physical condition at a glance. Feng Buping shook his head and said, "I'm a doctor. I can only observe the details of the human body based on the flow of qi and blood. It's useless in battle." Qiao Liandong had been scared away by Chu Xiu. Feng Buping was afraid of causing more trouble, so he immediately sent people to bring the things and set off for Guangzhou. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian still had to go to Jialing Dong family to participate in the mountain opening ceremony. On the way, Lu Fengxian asked Chu Xiu, "Brother Chu, now that you've stepped into the oneness of heaven and man, do you really have the strength to fight against a martial Dao Grand Master?" Lu Fengxian was still at the 5 qis collecting in origin. Although his accumulation was deep enough, he had not touched the threshold of the oneness of heaven and man. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Of course not. I haven't really fought against a martial Dao Grand Master. How can I be confident? But now I have the confidence to fight against a weaker martial Dao Grand Master." Lu Fengxian was surprised and said, "Then you still dare to stand out and challenge Qiao Liandong? What if he didn't get scared away by you and directly attacked?" Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "If I can beat him, then I'll fight him. If I can't, then I'm just a fox borrowing the tiger's power to rise." Lu Fengxian was puzzled and asked, "Borrowing the power of whose power? Yours? Mine?" Lu Fengxian's face was full of doubt. He was a rogue cultivator from the wilderness, and his background was not even as big as Chu Xiu's. What power did he have to borrow? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Brother Lu, sometimes you are too rigid. In fact, in the land of West Chu your foundation is deeper than mine. Many people know that the World Alliance's Qinqing Di appreciates you. Even if you don't plan to join the World Alliance, it is enough to scare people with Qinqing Di. If you had told Zhou Bai about your relationship with Emperor Qinqing Di from the beginning, he wouldn't have dared to come to the Dead Man Valley to look for trouble, even if his master Qiao Liandong was the same. The Celestial Master Mansion is a big Taoist sect. They follow the rules so they don't want to go too far. That's why Qiao Liandong has the courage to go to Dragon Tiger Mountain. But if it was the World Alliance, Qiao Liandong might not even dare to fart, because although the World Alliance is not as good as Dragon Tiger Mountain, Qinqing Di can directly punch him out. Lu Fengxian shook his head and said, "Since I don't want to join the World Alliance, it is not good to always borrow Senior Chen's name." Chu Xiu also secretly shook his head. Lu Fengxian's character could be said to be honest or stubborn, but he was indeed not flexible. If it was Chu Xiu, as long as he could borrow the power, he would definitely borrow it. On the surface he borrowed the power of the Guangzhou torture room, and in the dark he borrowed the power of the Yinma clan. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was unscrupulous. However, Chu Xiu didn't mind. He wasn't a hypocrite, but he was a true villain. In the martial world that was filled with killing intent, it was fine as long as the means were effective. Why would he care about principles and rules? As for Lu Fengxian, even Chu Xiu had to admit that he was lucky. No matter how unlucky he would probably be able to turn misfortune into blessing. Half a month later, Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian had arrived at Jialing County. The opening mountain sacrifice of the Dong family was about to begin, and there were many martial artists in Jialing County. Some were invited by the Dong family, and some came to watch the ceremony. There were many barren mountains and dense forests in the land of West Chu. The Dong family of Jialing was also built on the mountains, but most of them chose to build in places with rich qi of heaven and earth and good feng shui. When Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian walked into the Dong family, 2 disciples who were in charge of welcoming guests asked them politely, "May I ask which sect you are from, and do you have an invitation card?" Generally, when the opening mountain sacrifice was held by a force like the Dong family, they would find some familiar forces to watch the ceremony and explore the dangerous forest together. It could be considered as sharing the risk. Similarly, the participants could keep the good things they found, but the things that they could not take away would be left to the Dong family. However, for those who did not have an invitation card, as long as they did not deliberately come to make trouble, the Dong family would not refuse them. The livelier the opening mountain sacrifice, the better. Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "I am Chu Xiu of the Guanzhong torture room, and this is little Marquis Wen Lu Fengxian. I have long heard of the Dong family's opening mountain sacrifice, and this time I also want to join in the fun and observe." The eyes of the two guards immediately lit up when they heard this. Unexpectedly, these two were the top 10 geniuses on the Longhu list. He quickly said, "Since you two can come to our Dong family to watch the ceremony, our Dong family naturally welcomes you. Please come with me." After saying this, one of the guards led Chu Xiu to the inner hall. At this time there were already many people inside the Dong family. Some of the less famous people who came to watch the fun were waiting outside, while those with real backgrounds were sitting in the inner hall. It could not be said that this was the Dong family's force, it should be said that 99% of the big forces would do this. Otherwise, if they treated everyone equally, not only would they not get many good words, but some of the big force's disciples would also be dissatisfied. When Chu Xiu stepped into the inner hall, a voice suddenly rang out, "Hey brother Chu, you really came." Chu Xiu looked over and saw Fang Qishao sitting at a table in the corner, drinking wine and chewing peanuts. Fang Qishao had arrived much earlier than Chu Xiu, and he had been freeloading in the Dong family's food and watching the fun. In any case, he was the third genius on the Longhu list, and the future successor of Sword King City. But now he was alone in a corner, living miserably. One could imagine how many people he had offended during this time. If it was someone like Nie Donglu, it was estimated that he would be sitting in the center, surrounded by people flattering him. It would definitely be much more lively than Fang Qishao. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "I said that we would meet again at the mountain opening ceremony." Chu Xiu said to Lu Fengxian, "This is Sword King City Sword Chief Fang Qishao, a sword genius ranked 3rd on the Longhu list." Hearing this, Lu Fengxian hurriedly said, "So it is Sword Chief Fang Qishao, I have heard a lot about you." When Lu Fengxian said that he had heard a lot about you, he was not being polite, he really had heard a lot about you. After all, there were only a few people in the Jianghu who did not know the name of Sword Chief Fang Qishao. Chu Xiu then pointed at Lu Fengxian and said, "This is Marquis Wen Xiaolong Lu Fengxian, ranked 9th on the Longhu list and a good friend of mine." At this time, Fang Qishao did not greet Lu Fengxian, but looked at Lu Fengxian without blinking, causing Lu Fengxian to have goosebumps all over his body. After a long while, Fang Qishao said gloomily, "Brother Chu, did you bring Brother Lu here to deliberately cause trouble for me?" Lu Fengxian was stunned, he did not remember meeting Fang Qishao, why did it seem like he had something against him? Fang Qishao stared at Lu Fengxian and said gloomily, "I have always thought that although I can't beat Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen, at least in terms of being handsome and suave, I am much better than them. But now that I see Brother Lu, I know that there are people in the Jianghu who are more handsome than me, so I can't be ranked first in any aspect." Lu Fengxian looked at Fang Qishao in a daze, wondering if Chu Xiu had introduced the wrong person. He had heard the name of Sword Chief Fang Qishao for a long time, but he did not expect Fang Qishao to be such a narcissistic guy. Lu Fengxian was not narcissistic, but he also knew how his appearance was. No matter how humble he was, he could feel that in terms of handsomeness, Fang Qishao was not only a little inferior, but the two of them could not be compared at all. Chu Xiu shrugged at Lu Fengxian, indicating that Fang Qishao was really such a person, and he did not recognize the wrong person. LV Fengxian couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. This was truly unexpected. Could it be that there was something unusual about this extraordinary person? Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian sat next to Fang Qishao, and immediately attracted many people's attention. The people in the inner hall were basically people with some strength and fame in the Jianghu, and they thought for a while and recognized Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian. After all, with the fame of these two, it was not difficult to guess. It was rare to see 3 people in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard sitting together, but other than Lu Fengxian, it seemed that Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao were not well liked. One was scolded and the other made people speechless. Chapter 483. Chu Xiu was with Lu Fengxian and Fang Qishao. With their status, no one came to disturb them for a while. Chu Xiu's reputation in Jianghu was not very good. Although many people wanted to make friends with Fang Qishao, it was a pity that Fang Qishao had stayed here for a long time. Those who wanted to make friends with Fang Qishao were almost all rejected by Fang Qishao's mouth. Fang Qishao seemed a little funny when he was with Chu Xiu, a young talent of the same level. But when it came to those who were not as strong as him, his mouth was very poisonous. It definitely made people want to fight with him. Of course, those who wanted to fight with him could not beat him, and the martial arts masters who could beat Fang Qishao also had to worry about the reputation of Sword King City. As more and more people came, Chu Xiu also saw many acquaintances such as Yan Fian, the Cloud Sword Fairy of the Yunyu Palace. Chu Xiu had some enmity with the Yunyu Palace. Although the last time in Tongtian Tower, because of LV Fengxian's mediation, the enmity was resolved, but he still had nothing to say to the women of the Yunyu Palace. However, no matter what, LV Fengxian had saved Yan Fian once last time. Hence, when Yan Fian came in this time, he specially nodded at LV Fengxian, but then walked to the side. As one of the four great beauties of the martial arts world, Yan Fian was not as strong as Chu Xiu and the others, but she was very famous. Almost as soon as she came in, she was surrounded by a group of martial artists of the younger generation, fighting to be the first to flatter her. Fang Qishao pinched his chin and said doubtfully, "Yan Fian, this woman, used to be indifferent when she saw me in the past. Why did she suddenly greet me today? Could it be that she is interested in me? This is not good. The people of the Yunyu Palace do not marry outside. Marrying them is equivalent to marrying trouble. This is not good." Chu Xiu found this funny. He couldn't help but shake his head and say, "Some women can't be easily subdued. Yan Fian isn't someone to be trifled with. Even if she's interested in you, the Yunyu Palace won't stop you. Do you dare to marry her?" Fang Qishao thought about it and said, "I really wouldn't dare. That woman is not easy to deal with. However, there are people who are devoted to her. Just watch, as long as Yan Fian comes, she will definitely be followed by an infatuated person. For this opening mountain ceremony, that infatuated person has a 90% chance of coming." LV Fengxian asked curiously, "Infatuated seed?" Oh. Fang Qishao's sword-like eyebrows suddenly twitched towards the door and said, "Speaking of immortals, immortals will arrive. See, the infatuated seed has already arrived." At the door, a black-robed Ing Bailu stepped into the hall with a calm smile on his face. Ing Bailu seemed to have an innate ability. As long as he appeared, he would definitely attract everyone's attention and become the focus of the entire hall. He was as dazzling as the sun. Everyone looked at Ing Bailu, and at this moment, they couldn't help but think of 6 words. Outstanding young master, unparalleled in this world. These words were very appropriate to describe Ing Bailu. Even if his ranking on the Dragon and Tiger roll was not as high as Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao in the eyes of everyone, he was much more reliable than Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao. Moreover, everyone present also subconsciously looked at Chu Xiu. They knew that not long ago, Chu Xiu had pushed Ing Bailu's ranking down 1 place on the Dragon and Tiger roll, causing him to fall out of 5th place. Now that the two of them were facing each other, would they directly fight? A battle between the top 5 geniuses on the Dragon and Tiger roll would be quite interesting. However, to everyone's surprise, although Ing Bailu saw Chu Xiu, he did not have any intention of walking towards Chu Xiu. Instead, he walked straight towards Yan Fian. When the young cultivators surrounding Yan Fian saw Ing Bailu, their expressions changed and they immediately scattered. They were people who knew themselves well. Compared to Ing Bailu, they had no advantage at all. In front of Ing Bailu, these people could only feel ashamed of their inferiority. If they continued to stay here, they would only be making a fool of themselves. Ing Bailu looked at Yan Fian and said softly, "Miss Yan, we meet again. Since we last met, Miss Yan's cultivation has improved a lot. Congratulations." As he spoke, Ing Bailu took out a brocade box and handed it to Yan Fian. "Miss Yan, this is the 100 flower dew that I specially collected. Each of them is made from flower dew of the 6th revolution and above. They are very helpful for Miss Yan's cultivation." Yan Fian shook her head lightly and sighed, "Young Master Ing, you should take such a precious thing back. Fian can't afford it." Ing Bailu shook his head and said, "If even you, Miss Yan, can't handle the 100 blossom dew, then there's really no one in this world who can. Take it. This is just a token of my appreciation. You know my personality, I won't force anything." Yan Fian frowned slightly. She did not dislike Ing Bailu. It should be said that there was no woman who would dislike a man like Ing Bailu. Unfortunately, Yan Fian knew that she did not have any feelings for Ing Bailu. Even if she did, there would be no ending to this relationship. She was a disciple of the Yunyu Palace and the successor of the Yunyu Palace. In this life she was destined to take over the Yu Palace and make it strong again. Feelings did not belong to her and she did not even dare to think about it. Therefore she knew Ying Bailu's intentions, but Yan Fian kept rejecting him. "Young Master Ying, I appreciate your kindness but I really can't accept this." Yan Fian rejected him. Ying Bailu sighed and said softly, "Only Miss Yan is worthy of using the 100-flower dew. Since you don't want it, then it has lost its meaning." As soon as he finished speaking, a faint golden aura burst out from Ying Bailu's hand, and the brocade box directly turned into a cloud of mist. It was too late for the people present to stop it. They could only watch as the rich fragrance of the flowers dissipated in the air. Everyone could not help but shout in their hearts that it was such a waste. The 100-flower dew that was made from hundreds of rare flowers above the 6th revolution actually turned into fireworks just like that. It was such a waste. Fang Qishao, who was at the back, shook his head and said, "I give up, I really give up. This infatuated person is really willing to do it. His methods of picking up girls are so wasteful. If the Ying family was any weaker, it would not be enough for him to squander." Chu Xiu glanced at Fang Qishao. If it were any other aristocratic family, as long as they had a disciple as talented as Ying Bailu, they would probably also be willing to let him squander. Yan Fian looked at Ying Bailu helplessly and said, "Why do you have to do this? Young Master Ying, it is really impossible between us. Now that my master is injured, part of the Yu Palace's affairs are under my management. I am not in the mood for worldly affairs, and the Yu Palace's rules do not allow it." Ying Bailu stared at Yan Fian and said, "Sincerity can split open metal and stone. Nothing in this world is impossible. By the way, is Palace Master Lin's injury serious? My Ying family has experts specializing in the medical way, and all kinds of precious spirit herbs. They will definitely be of help to Palace Master Lin." Yan Fian shook her head and said, "Many thanks for young Master Ying's good intentions, but there is no need to trouble the Ying family. Last time, during the righteous and demonic battles on Floating Jade Mountain, my master was ambushed and injured by those demonic cultivators. Her injury is not serious but it is a little strange. I have already asked around, and this injury can be treated by West Chu's divine Dr. Feng Buping. Since I am here to participate in the Dong family's mountain opening ceremony, I will invite divine Dr. Feng to my Yu Palace to help treat her." Ying Bailu nodded and said, "I have heard of the name Infuriating Yama Feng Buping. Although he comes from an unorthodox background, he does have some skills in the medical way. However, I heard that he has a stubborn personality, and the conditions for treating people are very harsh. But no matter, my Ying family has everything. Whatever Feng Buping wants, I can take it out." At this time, someone in the hall suddenly said, "Fairy Yan, if you want to find divine Dr. Feng, you are a step too late. Divine Dr. Feng has already left the Valley of the Dead and went to the Guanzhong Pass to practice medicine. However, his relationship with Lu Fengxian is not bad. As long as little Marquis Wen asks, I believe that Divine Dr. Feng might not need anything to treat Palace Mistress Lin. Dead Man Valley was not far from Jialing County, and Feng Buping's reputation in West Chu was not small. Many people already knew about what happened in Dead Man Valley. However, the person who spoke did not have any good intentions. He was not purposely reminding Yan Fian, but was provoking Ying Bailu to go over to Chu Xiu's side. Everyone knew that Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu were close friends. If Yan Fian went to beg Lu Fengxian, how could Ying Bailu feel good? He was purposely stirring up trouble. As expected, when that person spoke, Yan Fian also looked over at Lu Fengxian. She walked to Lu Fengxian's side and bowed to Lu Fengxian. "Young hero Lu, we meet again. Is Divine Dr. Feng really in the Guanzhong area?" Yan Fian had a very deep impression of Lu Fengxian. Last time in Tong Tian Tower, it was Lu Fengxian who saved her. Although she did not have Lu Fengxian, she still had a trump card, but it would make her pay a certain price. However, what truly left a deep impression on Yan Fian was that Lu Fengxian actually used this favor to resolve the conflict between the Yunu Palace and Chuxiu. In the current Jianghu, morality and justice were placed on the two sides, while benefits were placed in the middle. There were not many who could be as loyal as Lu Fengxian. And from that time onwards, Yan Fian also saw Lu Fengxian's strength. At that time, she felt that Lu Fengxian was definitely not someone who would stay in a small pond. As expected, in a short period of time, Lu Fengxian was already in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard, and was even below her. And Yan Fian also felt that if they really fought, she most likely would not be able to win against Lu Fengxian. She could be ranked above Lu Fengxian only because she was a woman, one of the four great beauties of the martial world. Her fame and influence was much greater than Lu Fengxian's. Lu Fengxian nodded and said, even if Divine Dr. Feng hasn't reached the Guangzhong area now, he will be there soon. If Miss Yin wants to ask Divine Dr. Feng to treat, I can help you put in a word. However, Divine Dr. Feng has his own rules. As for the consultation fee, I still need Miss Yin to personally discuss it with Divine Dr. Feng. Chapter 484. In this pugilistic world, there was no shortage of onlookers. In the inner hall, there were 5 young talents in the top 10 of the Longhu list. Not to mention the mountain opening ceremony, even during the righteous and demonic battles on Mount Fuyu, there weren't so many people gathered here. The relationship between these 5 people was complicated, and those onlookers couldn't wait for them to fight. At this time, seeing Yan Fian taking the initiative to talk to Lu Fengxian, Ying Bailu slightly frowned. However, he didn't get angry, nor did he flare up. He just walked over to Lu Fengxian and said, then I'll have to trouble Brother Lu to help mediate. Don't worry, as long as Divine Dr. Feng asks, the consultation fee is not a problem. As long as our Shang River Ying clan has it, we will be able to provide it. Seeing Ying Bailu's performance, everyone present couldn't help but secretly praise him. Ying Bailu was indeed Ying Bailu. He really lived up to his reputation. One attitude and one sentence was enough to resolve everything. Ying Bailu's words made it seem as if he and Yan Fian were family. The two of them went to beg Lu Fengxian together, and even narrowed the distance between him and Yan Fian. Hearing Ying Bailu's words, Yan Fian also frowned slightly, but she didn't say anything. If she refused at this time, it would be somewhat embarrassing for Ying Bailu. At this time, Ying Bailu also looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, Brother Chu, we meet again. The matter with the Luo clan was just a misunderstanding. As you can see, I only love Lady Yan now. Facing Chu Xiu, who pushed him down the ranking, Ying Bailu's attitude didn't change at all. It was as if he was facing an old friend. At least in the eyes of outsiders, Ying Bailu's attitude was absolutely flawless. Saying this, Ying Bailu also looked at Yan Fian. He wasn't actually explaining to Chu Xiu but to Yan Fian. He was afraid that Yan Fian would misunderstand something. Chu Xiu touched his nose and said, I can see that if Brother Ying had taken action, it would have been very difficult for me to smoothly escape with Luo Feiheng and the others. Ying Bailu nodded and turned to look at Fang Qishao. He cupped his fists and said, Brother Fang, it's been a while since we last met, right? Fang Qishao poured a cup of wine for Ying Bailu and said with a smile, It's been a while, but I don't want to see you too much. Because as long as I'm with you, as long as it's a woman, her eyes will definitely be glued to you. Treating me like air is not a good feeling. Ying Bailu smiled and said, Brother Fang, you are still so humorous. After exchanging a few words, the atmosphere was very awkward. Therefore, Yan Fian was the first to bid farewell. Ying Bailu also left with Yan Fian. Only then did the atmosphere lighten up. Fang Qishao played with the wine cup in his hand. Suddenly he laughed strangely and said to Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian, Actually, Ying Bailu is quite a character. Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu looked at each other, then looked at Fang Qishao. Do I need you to say that? Fang Qishao shook his head and said, What I mean is that Ying Bailu's potential is definitely not limited to this. To put it bluntly, there aren't many people on the Dragon and Tiger list that can catch my eye. Ying Bailu's potential is terrifying, but it's a pity that he is deeply involved in the tribulations of love. If he can't walk out of it, his life will be miserable. As he said that, Fang Qishao shook his head and muttered something, as if he was mumbling something mysterious. This guy was out of habit. Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian didn't respond and continued to wait in the inner hall. After a while, quite a few people came and Xie Xiaolu was among them. Seeing Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu, Xie Xiaolu was pleasantly surprised. He walked over and said, Brother Chu, Brother Lu, you're here too? Compared to Chu Xiu and the others who came uninvited, Xie Xiaolu was invited by the Dong family. The World Alliance was one of the strongest forces in West Chu, and Qinqingdi was famous throughout the world. It was normal for the Dong family to invite the World Alliance. However, Emperor Qinqingdi didn't have the time. His relationship with the Dong family wasn't that good, so he was too lazy to participate in the mountain opening ceremony. Therefore, he directly sent Xie Xiaolu here, which could be considered as giving face to the Dong family. Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian chatted with Xie Xiaolu for a while and introduced him to Fang Qishao. However, Fang Qishao's attitude towards Xie Xiaolu was much colder than Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian. He only gave him a greeting and didn't say much. Even though the seventh young master Fang looked like a clown, he was actually a very prideful person. His sword Dao was naturally formed. Just as he had mentioned earlier, there were not many people on the Longhu leaderboard that could catch his eye. He had experienced Chu Xiu's strength before, so it was enough to obtain his approval. Although he had never fought or interacted with Lu Fengxian, there were no weaklings in the top 10 of the Tiger and Dragon list. Most importantly, Lu Fengxian had an appearance that could make a narcissistic person like Fang Qishao feel ashamed. Just based on this point, Lu Fengxian was enough to obtain Fang Qishao's approval. As a disciple of Qinqing Di, Xie Xiaolu was also in the top 20 of the Tiger and Dragon list. Compared to other people, he was naturally an outstanding young hero, but compared to people like Fang Qishao, he was still a level lower. However, Xie Xiaolu didn't care about it. In his view, this was Fang Qishao who was ranked third on the Tiger and Dragon list. It was normal for Fang Qishao to have this kind of cold attitude. Of course, if Xie Xiaolu knew what kind of personality Fang Qishao had, he would probably have a feeling that his image had collapsed. In the Dong family's mountain opening ceremony, everyone who should come had already arrived. From the Dong family's side, a young martial artist in his 20s walked over and cupped his hands towards everyone present. Everyone, the mountain opening ceremony is about to begin. Please come to the back mountain. The people in the inner hall all stood up and followed the young man to the back mountain of the Dong family. At this time, there were already many people gathered at the back mountain. In addition to the Dong family's disciples, there were even a few martial Dao Grand Masters. The mountain opening ceremony was a big event for the Dong family, so it was better to invite a few martial Dao Grand Masters to participate in it. Moreover, the rule of the mountain opening ceremony was that anything found by the martial artists who came to help would belong to them. Of course, only the things that could be taken away, and the things that could not be taken away would belong to the Dong family. In this way, neither side would suffer a loss. The Dong family's strength was considered middle among the 9 great families, and they had 2 martial Dao Grand Masters. Among them, the Dong family's old ancestor, who was slightly older, was in charge of the Dong family, while the Dong family's patriarch, Dong Qikuan, who was in his prime, led the Dong family's disciples to cut down the forest. When Chu Xiu and the others arrived, a martial Dao Grand Master beside Dong Qikuan saw Chu Xiu. His face suddenly sank and he said coldly, "Chu Xiu, you still dare to stay in West Chu? Do you really take I's words as farts?" This martial Dao Grand Master was Floating Blood Sword, Qiao Liandong. He was also one of the martial Dao Grand Masters invited by the Jailing Dong family to participate in the mountain opening ceremony. After the incident in the Dead Man Valley, Qiao Liandong felt that something was wrong the more he thought about it. Wasn't it a little too careless for him to be scared away by Chu Xiu just like that? However, he had already said it and it was too late to regret it. This matter was considered over. However, he did not expect that Chu Xiu would actually appear in the Jailing Dong family again. Back then he had given Chu Xiu and himself a way out. As long as Chu Xiu left West Chu, this matter would be considered over. However, now that Chu Xiu appeared here again, it was obvious that he was forcing him to take action. Chu Xiu said calmly, "Senior Qiao, you're so mighty. Do you think the land of West Chu belongs to your family? You can't let anyone stay here if you don't want them to. I think even the West Chu royal family is not as mighty as you." Qiao Liandong's face darkened. He was scared away by Chu Xiu last time. This time he wanted to see if this Chu Xiu really had the strength to fight a martial Dao Grand Master. However, at this moment, the Dong family's patriarch, Dong Qikuan, frowned slightly. The mountain opening ceremony was going to be held at noon. This was not the place to fight. Therefore, Dong Qikuan immediately pulled Qiao Liandong and said, "Brother Qiao, you're also a senior in the martial world. Why do you have to be so calculative with a young martial artist?" Qiao Liandong snorted coldly and said, "I don't want to be calculative with this young martial artist, but this Chu Xiu keeps provoking me again and again. If I don't even respond, where do you want me to put my face?" Dong Qikuan had no intention of mediating the grudge between Qiao Liandong and Chu Xiu. He just didn't want these two guys to disrupt the mountain opening ceremony. Dong Qikuan glanced at Chu Xiu and secretly transmitted his voice, "Brother Qiao, give me some face. If you want to resolve the grudge between you two, wait until after the mountain opening ceremony. The auspicious time has been chosen. If it's too late, it won't be a good omen. Moreover, look at the people around Chu Xiu. Although they are all young martial artists, none of them are easy to mess with. He has Sword King City's heir, Sword Chief Fang Qishao, and World Alliance's Qinqing Di's disciple, Xie Xiaolu on his side. Sword King City is in the western regions. Even if you don't give face to Sword King City, don't tell me you won't give face to Qinqing Di? Xiao Liandong's body stiffened when he heard the three words Qinqing Di, and the tense atmosphere completely dissipated. In the land of West Chu, Qinqing Di's strength was not the strongest. There were many powerhouses in the land of West Chu, such as Longhu Mountain's Celestial Master Abode, Moon-worshipping cult, Forgetting Sword Hut. There were many who were stronger than Qinqing Di, but Qinqing Di's reputation was the greatest. With a pair of iron fists, Emperor Qinqing's domineering aura was unparalleled. Others would abide by the rules of Jianghu, but Qinqing Di would only use his pair of iron fists to break any rules. In the past, Xiao Liandong dared to go to Longhu Mountain to demand justice, but he did not dare to go to the World Alliance to say a word. Now that Qinqing Di's disciple was here, he was also afraid of offending Qinqing Di. Therefore, Xiao Liandong could only coldly snort and say, "Today I will give Patriarch Dong some face and will not make things difficult for you here. But if you continue to be so ungrateful, don't blame me for bullying the weak." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He did not take Xiao Liandong seriously at all. A martial Dao grandmaster like Xiao Liandong, who was born as a rogue cultivator, was strong, but he was very cautious. Although Chu Xiu did not hear what Xiao Liandong said to Dong Qikuan, he could guarantee that Xiao Liandong was not afraid of Fang Qishao's identity, but Xie Xiaolu. Chapter 485. The mountain opening ceremony offered sacrifices to both the heavens and the people. After the great calamity of ancient times, the land of West Chu was filled with wilderness and dense forests. Vicious beasts and evil spirits were everywhere. Not to mention being suitable for ordinary people to live in, even if martial artists entered it, few could survive. The current West Chu had gone through tens of thousands of years of arduous reclamation by their predecessors. Only then did it have its current flourishing appearance. Therefore, every time the mountain opening ceremony was held, apart from offering sacrifices to the heavens, it also had to offer sacrifices to the ancestors who had painstakingly paved the way for the future generations. On the hillside behind the Dong family's residence, a huge table was placed in the center. The crowd stood in the back, and only the people of the Dong family stood beside the table. On those huge tables were not the three animals used by ordinary people to offer sacrifices. Instead, there were ferocious beasts, tigers, leopards, and so on. Moreover, they were all alive. At this time, a wizened old sorcerer wearing colorful clothes and a ferocious ghost mask walked to the center of those tables and began to dance. Although it looked somewhat comical, it gave off a simple and desolate feeling. The land of West Chu was popular in the ghost god witchcraft technique. The moon-worshipping cult was the master of this technique. Even if the Dong family belonged to the 9 great families and was considered a righteous sect, they would rather believe in these traditional things than not. As the old warlock danced, he sang something in an incomprehensible language. As his singing spread, the tigers, leopards, and beasts that were struggling strangely became unusually obedient, like cats. At this time, the other warriors of the Dong family walked over with sharp blades in their hands and started to bleed the beasts. Even if they saw their own blood flowing, the beasts could only stare blankly at it. Their bodies twitched, but they didn't resist at all. As the old sorcerer's singing and dancing stopped, the blood of the beasts also flowed out and gathered in the center, unexpectedly turning into a very strange blood-red rune, mysterious and evil. Dong Qikuan raised his wine bowl to the sky and said loudly, "A toast to the heavens, bless my Dong family's safety." His internal force erupted, and the wine in the bowl evaporated into the air. Dong Qikuan poured another bowl of wine on the ground and said loudly, "A toast to the heavens, bless my Dong family's harvest." Finally, Dong Qikuan forced out a drop of his blood and poured it on the ground. He said in a deep voice, "A toast to the ancestors, bless my Dong family's prosperity for generations." After 3 bowls of wine, Dong Qikuan said in a deep voice, "The mountain opening ceremony is complete. Everyone, bless my Dong family's safety." With these words, the members of the Dong clan took the lead and walked into the pitch-black forest that was densely covered by trees. Chu Xiu and the others looked at each other before following the crowd into the undeveloped, desolate land. Chu Xiu and others looked at each other and followed the crowd into the mountain. It was unknown how the trees in the West Chu land grew, but they were over 30 feet tall. Some of the giant trees were so thick that it would take several people to wrap their arms around them. There were dense trees everywhere. Even if you flew up into the sky, you wouldn't be able to see what was inside. Therefore, during the opening ceremony, members of the Dong clan would bring all kinds of tools and leave marks in this area. Then they would sweep through the entire area and record which places were safe and where there were mineral resources. After that, they would cut down the valuable trees in these areas and pave the way. From then on, this area would be the Dong clan's territory. Compared to the lands of northern Yen and eastern Qi, the various powers of West Chu also competed with each other, but it was not as intense. The remaining land is so big. If you want it, you can rely on your own strength to cut down the forest and bear the danger. There is no need to fight with others. Of course, this is just a normal method. In fact, there are many dangers in this forest. All kinds of strange poisonous insects and fierce beasts are just a small path. The most difficult to deal with are the evil creatures left behind from ancient times. Chu Xiu, Fang Qishao, Lu Fengxian, and Xia Xiaolu walked together. Apart from Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian, who were seriously exploring, Fang Qishao and Xia Xiaolu were somewhat absent-minded. Seventh young master Fang casually waved his hand, and a stream of sword qi sliced a dark green little snake that was about to pounce on them while hiding in the dead leaves. He said lazily, "I say, let's just walk around for a bit and then we'll get out of here." Aside from the beginning when they performed the great shaman dance, what else is there to look at in this deep mountain forest? 4 rogue cultivators, even if they didn't find any ancient treasures, there were still many rare flowers and herbs that could be harvested for medicinal purposes. But for Fang Qishao, he was the successor of Sword King City. How could he lack these things? Even if a 5th revolution or 6th revolution spirit herb was at his feet, he wouldn't even bother to pick it. Chu Xiu cast a glance at 7th young master Fang. This guy's mouth is really a big problem. He actually described the solemn mountain opening ceremony of the Dong clan as a dance. If these words were heard by the people of the Dong clan, they would definitely fight him to the death. Dong family's opening mountain ceremony covers such a large area. What if we find some ancient ruins? Although there are some things we can't take away, even if we can take away 1 or 2 of them, it won't be a wasted trip. Chu Xiu said calmly as he walked in a certain direction. Chu Xiu didn't know where the ancient demon god Lv Wenho's inheritance land was. However, he knew the specific location according to the original plot. Although Chu Xiu didn't know some of the details, he just had to deal with it when the time came. In the original plot, Lu Fengxian's strength was almost the same as it was now. He could obtain the inheritance by himself. Now that Chu Xiu joined them, their chances should be higher. Fang Qishao shrugged his shoulders. In any case, he wasn't interested in most of the inheritances. He didn't even care about some of the Sword Daos and Sword King City, let alone the others. After walking in the direction according to his memory for nearly a day and a half, Fang Qishao started to get impatient. He came here to join in the fun. However, apart from the opening mountain ceremony, which was a bit interesting, they spent the rest of the time wandering in the barren mountains and forests. Occasionally they would kill some fierce beasts and roast them. However, due to their poor cooking skills, the roast beasts didn't taste good. Therefore, Fang Qishao started to get annoyed. Just as Fang Qishao was getting impatient and was about to leave, Lu Fengxian suddenly said, "Something's wrong." Chu Xiu nodded. Fang Qishao also nodded with rapt attention. Only Xia Xiaolu was confused and asked, "What's wrong?" Chu Xiu pointed to the front and said, "The sound." Xia Xiaolu immediately reacted. Indeed, the sound was a bit wrong. Although there was no aura coming from the front, it was completely silent. It had to be known that in the West Chu jungle, there were countless fierce beasts, snakes, and insects. There would definitely be all kinds of sounds coming from there. However, there was only silence in front of them. There was only one possibility. There was a very terrifying existence in front of them. The aura it emitted made the sensitive snakes, insects, and fierce beasts not dare to approach. Chu Xiu and the others looked at each other. At this time, even Fang Qishao became interested. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Be careful." The few of them nodded and headed in that direction. After walking for around 4 hours, Chu Xiu and the others could feel that something was wrong. The pressure in front of them was getting stronger and stronger. Especially the ground under their feet was filled with a dark red color, as if blood had dyed the ground red. Continuing forward, the trees became sparser and a strange thing appeared in front of them. It was strange to the point that Chu Xiu and the others didn't know how to describe it. It was a giant building that was thousands of meters tall. It was like a giant bowl that was upside down on the ground. In one direction there was a giant wordless stone tablet. If this thing was shrunk 1,000 times, everyone would be very familiar with it. This was a tomb, a huge tomb, a tomb that suppressed a demon god. This was the tomb of the ancient demon god Lu Wenho. It couldn't even be called a tomb because it was not used to bury Lu Wenho, but rather used by his enemies to suppress him. The history of the ancient times was extremely chaotic. There were many legends about the life of the demon god Lu Wenho, but no one knew the real situation. But now people could be sure that Lu Wenho was not a good person. A good person would not be called a demon god. In the past, many experts besieged Lu Wenho and his subordinates. It was said that Lu Wenho's cultivation was extremely high. He had cultivated the nine heavens fiend golden body to the level of immortal demon body. Broken limbs could be regenerated, and even beheaded could be used to kill enemies. So, even if people killed Lu Wenho, they couldn't guarantee that he was really dead. So, they deliberately built such a big tomb to suppress Lu Wenho and his subordinates, so that they could never be reincarnated. Could be said that it was very vicious, but it also showed how terrifying Lu Wenho was. Fang Qishao looked at the big tomb and murmured, "What is this thing? The key is, how do we enter it?" Since this big tomb was originally prepared to suppress Lu Wenho, it naturally didn't leave any entrance. The surroundings were sealed, not even a gap was left. Chu Xiu glanced at the other side of the big tomb and said lightly, "Don't worry, people have already started. Just follow behind them." When Chu Xiu and the others arrived at the other side of the big tomb, they found Dong Qikuan leading dozens of martial artists of the Dong clan, Qiao Liandong, and another martial Dao grandmaster were already studying how to enter the tomb. However, after much discussion, they could only come up with the conclusion that they should attack by force. But this big tomb was still very exciting for Dong Qikuan and the others. Although Chu Xiu was the only one present who knew what was buried in it, others could tell that it was absolutely not an ordinary thing just by looking at its size and the power it exuded. Even if it was a major power like the Dong family, they wouldn't always have a harvest in every opening ceremony. This time, only a few days had passed since the opening ceremony, and they had already discovered such an ancient ruin. Dong Qikuan really thought that it was the blessing of the ancestors. Chapter 486. The large tomb that suppressed the demon god Lv Wenho was filled with formations, but the outside was only reinforced with ordinary materials, so it was not too difficult to destroy it. Dong Qikuan and the other two martial Dao grandmasters attacked together, and they soon blasted a hole in the large tomb. In the blink of an eye, a thick and pungent smell of blood wafted out from the hole. The aura was extremely cold, causing people to shudder. The three of them looked at each other, but no one went in first. Instead, some of the rogue cultivators tried to enter the tomb when they saw that the martial Dao grandmasters did not respond. The rule of the opening mountain ceremony was that as long as you could take it away. The Dong family would not care. Therefore, when these people saw that Dong Qikuan did not move, they wanted to take the initiative. Chu Xiu looked on coldly from the side. Among these people who came to participate in the opening mountain ceremony, some were sensible people, and some were idiots who could not care about anything else when benefits were in front of them. It was true that it was good to take the initiative, but martial Dao grandmasters were not idiots who would watch helplessly as others took the initiative. Dong Qikuan and the other two had clearly sensed that the aura inside was not right, and they were afraid that it was dangerous, so they deliberately did not make a move. They wanted to wait for others to go in and explore. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, there was no abnormality inside, so Dong Qikuan and the others entered. The Dong family's cultivators did the same. At this time, Yin Fian also came over with the Yu Palace's people, and Ying Bailu followed closely behind her. These people were stunned when they saw the large tomb, but they also entered. Chu Xiu said to Lu Fengxian and the others, "Since so many people have gone in, let's go in and join in the fun." Everyone nodded and followed Chu Xiu into the large tomb. Among them, Fang Qishao was not interested in the things inside the large tomb, but he was quite interested in the large tomb itself. He wanted to know what was buried inside. As soon as everyone entered through the hole, they felt a bone-piercing chill. Inside the pit was a long passageway that twisted and turned. The passageway was covered in runes. Chu Xiu frowned and said, "The formation in this tomb is suppressing our senses." Lu Fengxian and the others nodded in agreement. They could also sense that their senses were suppressed to zero in this tomb. It could even be said that their senses were no different from an ordinary person's. They could only rely on their eyes and ears to distinguish their surroundings. The few of them carefully explored the passageway before them. At that moment, seventh young master Fang suddenly exclaimed, "This passageway itself is built according to the runes." The passageway they were walking on was full of twists and turns just like a maze. After listening to Fang Qishao's explanation, they realized that the path they were walking on was indeed like a rune. What kind of rune is it? Chu Xiu asked. Fang Qishao spread out his hands and said, how would I know? I've only occasionally seen similar runes in Sword King City's formations. I don't have any knowledge about these things. In Sword King City, Fang Qishao wasn't interested in anything other than sword techniques. It was already good enough that he could recognize that this passageway was a rune. Everyone kept walking along the twisting passageway. The passageway seemed endless. Fang Qishao couldn't help but mutter, fuck, is this place really a maze? Did the person who built this thing have a hole in his head? Did he build this maze to trap someone to death? Chu Xiu and the others didn't respond. They just let Fang Qishao talk to himself. Only Xie Xiaolu was slightly surprised. Why did this aloof, sword chief Fang Qishao talk so much? At this time, the passageway in front of everyone finally disappeared. What appeared in front of them was a cold pool. Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air burst out. His eyes blossomed with divine light, but it dimmed in the blink of an eye. The formation in this place not only suppressed his perception, but also his mental power. He couldn't even use the heaven's sun gazing at air. Xie Xiaolu said from the side, let me try. Saying so, Xie Xiaolu took out a seed and threw it into the pool. In an instant, the seed bloomed into a small white flower. Xie Xiaolu said, this is a spiritual wood flower. It's very sensitive to dangerous things. If there's an abnormality in the water, it won't bloom. Everyone also looked carefully, and indeed they did not find anything strange, so they all stepped into the river and continued to move forward. The pool wasn't deep, only reaching their waist. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, they crossed the pool. What appeared in front of them was another passageway. Chu Xiu furrowed his brows, but he continued walking forward. Chu Xiu had explored a lot of ancient ruins, but he hadn't seen many like this big tomb suppressing Marquis Lu one. There wasn't much danger. Let alone vicious beasts, there weren't even any formation traps. The only thing that was wrong was that this formation was suppressing their perception and mental power. But it was only suppressing, not eroding, so it wasn't a big deal. After walking for another 2 hours, Chu Xiu suddenly felt that something was wrong. It was abnormally awkward. He closed his eyes. When Chu Xiu opened his eyes again, he suddenly made a move. He formed a great diamond wheel seal with both hands and directly attacked Fang Qishao. But Fang Qishao seemed to have sensed something in advance. His figure was like a willow catkin, dodging to the side. Chu Xiu's great diamond wheel seal hit the wall of the passageway, making a loud noise, and in an instant rubble flew everywhere. Fang Qishao looked surprised and angry. Brother Chu, why did you suddenly attack me? Are you crazy? Lu Fengxian and Xie Xiaolu also looked at Chu Xiu and said, yes, Brother Chu, what happened? Why did you suddenly attack Brother Fang? Chu Xiu sneered and said, your acting is quite good, even I didn't notice it at the beginning. But it's hard to paint a tiger's bones. Your disguise is indeed flawless, especially in this kind of situation where mental power is suppressed. Even I can't see anything unusual. But unfortunately you can disguise a person's appearance, but you can't disguise a person's character. For a talkative person like Fang Qishao, you want him to walk in a passageway for 2 hours without saying a word, is that possible? Also, when I attacked you just now, if the person beside me was really Lu Fengxian, he wouldn't have any doubts about me, but would directly stand on my side and attack you together. And Xie Xiaolu and I have fought side by side several times, he also has enough trust in me. When I attacked you, he also wouldn't stand on the side of a sword leader that he has only met once. Tell me, what are you guys? At the beginning, Chu Xiu really didn't notice anything wrong, but later on he felt that Fang Qishao didn't say anything, so he began to have doubts. So this time it was also thanks to Chu Xiu entering with Fang Qishao. If Chu Xiu only entered with people like Lu Fengxian and Xie Xiaolu who didn't talk much, then Chu Xiu probably wouldn't have noticed anything unusual. Moreover, Chu Xiu also roughly guessed when the 3 people were switched, it should be when they passed by the pool. There was indeed something wrong with the pool. If Chu Xiu was not mistaken, there were also 3 disguised things by 7th young Master Fang and the others' side now. Even the tunnel they were walking in was not the same one. Because their perception and mental power were suppressed, who knows how many passageways there were in front of them. Under the premise that they didn't have perception, it was very easy to use some simple camouflage to fool Chu Xiu and the others. At this time, the 3 things suddenly didn't say a word, but their bodies had already begun to change. Their clothes melted, and they turned into humanoid objects completely made of black water. Their faces had no facial features and they looked very evil. I didn't expect to be discovered so quickly, and for such a funny reason. The younger generation will surpass the older. The three humanoid things spoke at the same time. Their voices were muffled as if they were coming from a large vat, and they looked very evil. What are you? Chu Xiu frowned. Thing? The three humanoid things laughed at the same time and said, who knows how many years have passed, the younger generation of the future already don't know our names? Forget it, under Lord Wenho's command, we're just nameless people. As their laughter faded, the three humanoid things actually combined together, forming a figure wearing battle armor. However, the battle armor on the figure was also made of water, and his face still had no facial features. There were only ripples on the surface of the water, and he looked extremely evil. My name is Shui Wuxiang. In the past, I was only a pawn under Lord Wenho's command. Today you juniors have entered this place. To be able to become Lord Wenho's reborn body, you should feel honored. Those old fellows' bodies are too old. The kid with the sword is not bad, the kid with the black dragon's bloodline is also not bad, and you are also not bad. Of course the kid with the halberd is the best. If it wasn't for the fact that Lord Wenho's true soul still exists, I would have suspected that he was the reincarnation of Lord Wenho. Obediently wait for Lord Wenho's true soul to be reborn. If you are chosen as Lord Wenho's true soul, I will help you preserve your true soul with the phaseless divine water. In the future I will also find a body for you. You can follow Lord Wenho to roam the world and you won't regret this life. The sword user Shui Wuxiang mentioned should be Fang Qi Xiao, and the halberd user Lu Fengxian, but who was the black dragon's bloodline? Xia Xiao Lu Ing Bai Lu or someone else? However, this was no longer important. Chu Xiu directly sneered and said, those who are already dead, why do they still struggle to live? Your Lord Wenho was already toyed to death 10,000 years ago, and now he still wants to roam the world? I reckon that before he crawls out of his grave, he would already be suppressed by the Taoist priests of Celestial Master Mansion. Chapter 487. No one knew which was stronger between the martial Tao of the ancient era and the martial Tao of the present. However, it was certain that the predecessors were not necessarily stronger than the people of the present. In this world there was no such thing as the strongest cultivation technique, only the strongest people. There were countless powerhouses in the ancient era, and in the current era, there was also Dugu Weiwei who could swallow the heavens with demonic flames, as well as Ning Xuanji who was known as an immortal. The cultivation techniques of the ancient era were very powerful, and in the current era, there were also people who created amazing cultivation techniques, such as the Reverence Moon sect leader Yi Xiaonan's Heaven Mending Heart Sutra. However, the only thing that was certain was that some of the secret techniques of the ancient era were very strange, and no one could figure out the principles behind them. For example, this Shui Wuxiang in front of him, Chu Xiu could not figure out whether he was a human or a ghost. He kept saying that he was a pawn under Marquis Lu Wen in the past, but now it seemed that his position under Marquis Lu Wen was not low. However, Chu Xiu was not afraid of him. It was already 10,000 years later, and everything in the ancient era had already disappeared. No matter how strong this Shui Wuxiang was in the ancient era, he was definitely not that strong now. Even using the stupidest method to guess, if this Shui Wuxiang really was very strong, he would not need to deliberately disguise himself as Fang Qi Xiao and the others to follow Chu Xiu. If he wanted to lure Chu Xiu to a certain place, he could just directly attack. He was already a weak chicken, but he was still breathing heavily here. It seemed that this guy had been suppressed for too long, and had not figured out the situation. At this time, when Shui Wuxiang heard that Chu Xiu actually dared to insult Lord Marquis Wen, he could not help but reveal anger and said, a junior of the later generation dares to speak such nonsense, courting death. Just as his voice fell, Shui Wuxiang's hands moved, turning into a blade and a sword, slashing towards Chu Xiu with a deep chill. Chu Xiu's eyes narrowed, and his hands formed the wisdom fist seal. His earth net sky encirclement directly enveloped Shui Wuxiang. A great Vajra wheel seal smashed down, instantly shattering the blade and sword, causing water droplets to splatter everywhere. Another seal descended, directly smashing Shui Wuxiang's head into smithereens. Trapped within the wisdom fist seal's astral energy domain, Shui Wuxiang wanted to escape, but he realized that he couldn't. He couldn't help but shout in anger, you. However, just as he spat out a word, Chu Xiu's third great Vajra wheel seal had already landed, directly smashing his body into a pool of water. The black water droplet seeped into the ground and completely disappeared. However, this guy should not be dead. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Just as he had guessed, this guy's strength was very weak. He was probably equivalent to a martial artist in the 5 Qis collecting in the Origin realm, and he was a relatively weak one. In this way, Fang Qishao and Lu Fengxian would definitely not be in danger, and Xie Xiaolu should also be safe. Of course, the premise was that they could discover that something was wrong in time, because Chu Xiu did not know where this guy was taking them. Looking around, Chu Xiu discovered that he seemed to have neglected one thing. Inside this big tomb, although his perception and mental strength were severely suppressed, his strength did not change much. This big tomb was used to suppress LV Wenhou. From what Shui Wuxiang had said, LV Wenhou should have really died, but it was only his corporeal body that died, not his true spirit. LV Wenhou should be able to borrow one of their bodies to resurrect. Because of this, even though this big tomb spirit array was extremely powerful, the material used to construct it was not very solid. Just a moment ago, Chu Xiu's great Vajra wheel seal had already smashed it to pieces. Therefore, Chu Xiu simply did not go back and forth in the twisted corridors. He directly chose to smash the walls and walk towards the central area. In fact, Chu Xiu's side was not the first to discover the situation. The first to discover that something was wrong was Fang Qishao. Shui Wuxiang could perfectly imitate a person's appearance, and could even disguise themselves based on their conversation. However, a person's personality could not be disguised. 7th young master Fang jabbered on for half a day, to the point where even Shui Wuxiang was starting to get annoyed and didn't know how to respond. It was precisely because he was a little slow in reacting that 7th young master Fang sensed that something was amiss and directly killed him. The reason why Xie Xiaolu discovered that something was wrong was because he felt that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu. Xie Xiaolu did not speak much, but he did ask Chu Xiu if he knew anything about Luo Feiheng's current situation. Shui Wuxiang could only imitate a person's appearance, but he could not imitate their memories. Therefore, when faced with Xie Xiaolu's question, Shui Wuxiang could only give a perfunctory reply. As a result, Xie Xiaolu found a loophole. With Chu Xiu's personality, he either knew or didn't know. This kind of perfunctory tone was definitely not Chu Xiu's habit. Xie Xiaolu had also stepped into the 5 Qis unification realm. However, he had just stepped into this realm, so his strength was still a bit weak. However, he was still able to smoothly deal with Shui Wuxiang. As for Lu Fengxian, he was the last to notice. It was not that Lu Fengxian was slow, but rather that he was not too familiar with Fang Qishao, so he did not notice that something was wrong with Fang Qishao. Xie Xiaolu did not speak much, and Chu Xiu did not speak much either. Only when he was about to be led into Shui Wuxiang's trap did he notice that Chu Xiu and the other two's footsteps were actually in sync. It was as if the three of them had a natural tacit understanding, as if they were the same person. This was very abnormal. As a result, Lu Fengxian opened his mouth to probe, and in the end he found that something was wrong. Just when Lu Fengxian was about to use his halberd to kill Shui Wuxiang suddenly said, "It is useless for thou to kill me. In this sealed land, as long as the black water does not run out, I will not die. Thou's title is Little Marquis Wen, and thou art destined to be fated with Lord Wenhou. In the future, when Lord Wenhou borrows your body to be reborn, I can also help you reconstruct your body, and let Lord Wenhou personally accept thee as his disciple. From now on, thou is no longer some little Marquis Wen, but the successor of the demon god, the reincarnation of Wenhou." The halberd in Lu Fengxian's hand directly slashed horizontally, and the scarlet astral chi was like a full moon, directly chopping Shui Wuxiang in two at the waist. "My apologies, I already have a master and my master is very good to me. I do not want to take another person as my disciple." Shui Wuxiang, who was chopped in two, did not resist. He said resentfully, "Fool! Who is thy master? Who is Lord Wenhou? How can an ant be mentioned in the same breath as a dragon?" This time Lu Fengxian did not say anything. He directly stomped on Shui Wuxiang, causing him to explode, turning him into black water that flowed into the ground. Looking at the surrounding walls, Lu Fengxian frowned slightly. After a short pause, he chose the same method as Chu Xiu, forcefully demolish it. Since the road ahead was blocked, then he would fight his way out himself. Fang Qishao and Chu Xiu were both stronger than him, so Lu Fengxian was not worried. Although Xie Xiaolu's strength was slightly weaker, he was, after all, Qin Qingdi's disciple. He had a lot of treasures in his hands, so he was not worried. At this time, other than Chu Xiu's group, the others had also fallen into Shui Wuxiang's trap. Of course, the martial masters were not. Dong Qikuan and the other martial masters were very strong, and were not easy to imitate. Furthermore, Lord Wenhou's rebirth required a young body. Although the martial masters were strong, they were too old and did not meet the requirements, so Shui Wuxiang did not put in any effort to imitate them. Apart from the few martial Dao grandmasters, the rest of the people who entered the tomb did not go through the same tunnel. Instead, they were already covered by the camouflage spell at the pool, and their companions were replaced. Those who reacted in time were either like Chu Xiu and LV Fengxian, taking a different path and directly smashing the passageway to open up a path, or they guessed that there was a trap ahead so they went back the way they came looking for another path. However, there were still some who didn't react in time. They were tricked into a secret room. In the secret room there was a blood-colored coffin, suppressing a mummy in battle armor. Anyone who entered the secret room was enveloped by boundless blood-colored threads, and their blood was sucked dry by the mummy, turning them into mummies. After the corpse sucked its fill of blood, its figure did not change. Instead, it condensed the blood into pearl-like blood beads and placed them under the blood coffin. The corpse spoke in a hoarse voice, "Shui Wuxiang, you spent so much effort to trick these few people, and there is not even a slightly stronger one. If this goes on, when will you be able to accumulate enough blood qi to revive Lord Wenhou? Among the four of us, aren't you known as Lord Wenhou's most intelligent and crafty subordinate? What happened to you now? After being suppressed for more than 10,000 years, have you become stupid?" Shui Wuxiang flew into a rage out of humiliation and said, "Shi Jiuling, the one who has become stupid is you. You and those two idiots have been suppressed for so many years, and your true spirits were almost destroyed. If I had not changed the spirit-suppressing and soul-locking curse of that ox nose into the spirit-accumulating and soul-locking curse, not to mention your true spirits, I'm afraid you would have already been reincarnated. Among the four of us only I can move freely. If it is not for me to plan all of this, you will have to continue waiting for another 10,000 years." Shi Jiuling let out a strange laugh and said, "Don't be so agitated. After waiting for so long, we finally see a living person. This opportunity is not easy. Shui Wuxiang, in the past, Lord Wenhou thought highly of you the most, but in the end we still lost. Now there is finally a glimmer of hope, so I will leave this matter to you to plan. I only hope that you will not mess up this time." Shui Wuxiang said coldly, "Don't worry, this is a heaven-sent opportunity. These few youngsters who came in even 10,000 years ago would be regarded as outstanding geniuses. Among them there is one with the sword Dao innate, one with the black dragon's bloodline, and the last one is incomparably powerful in both physical and mental strength, even I can't see through him. And the most amazing thing is that there is a young man who is 80% similar to Lord Wenhou when he was young. If not for Lord Wenhou's true spirit, I would have suspected that he is Lord Wenhou's reincarnation. These few youngsters can be used as Lord Wenhou's backup bodies. As for the others, they can be used as nourishment for Lord Wenhou's blood qi. One of my clones is leading a little girl here. That little girl's strength is not weak, and after devouring her blood qi, it can be compared to 100 people. Don't make any mistakes here. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.